Hiraku wakes up in a rustic log cabin and tells a maid with a glowing gem on her forehead to stop calling him master and to refer to him as the village chief instead. He walks into his kitchen and greets another horned maid who is cooking a red slime creature in a clay pot. He tells her not to burn the slime and steps outside into the bright morning sun. He stretches his arms and is greeted by a white-haired elf girl who mentions he is up early. A blonde angel with white wings also flies down and tells him she was just doing her morning patrols around the property. Hiraku watches several beastkin children running and playing in his lush courtyard. He takes a walk around his massive property, admiring his water wheel, the elves planting saplings, and his farm animals. He watches his black wolves run around while giant sheep and cows graze in the fields. He checks on his drying persimmons and feels incredibly grateful for this peaceful existence, knowing his past self could never have imagined living such a dreamlike life. In his past life, Hiraku wakes up in a hospital bed right as his heart stops beating and his miserable life comes to an end. Shortly after, he finds himself standing in a dark void in front of a divine man holding a massive wooden club. The man introduces himself as the god of this world and explains that Hiraku's previous 39 years of life were filled with terrible hardships and terminal illness, partly due to a mistake that God made. To make up for this error, God offers to reincarnate Hiraku into a new world with a completely healthy body that will never get sick. Hiraku easily accepts the offer and asks if he can spend his new life doing farming in a quiet place far away from civilization since he was never good at socializing. God agrees to his request and decides to grant him a special power called the omnipotent farming tool before sending him off to enjoy his second life. Hiraku wakes up on the ground in a dense forest. He looks up at the bright sky and realizes his body feels completely healthy and young again. He jumps up and celebrates his new body, thrilled to finally be able to move around without pain. He takes a look around and notices he is surrounded by massive trees in every direction. He realizes God really put him far away from civilization, maybe a bit too far since there is nothing around him. He checks his clothes and sees he looks like a basic villager. He remembers the tool God gave him and tries to summon it. A glowing light appears in his hand and forms into a golden magic hoe. He strikes the ground with it and discovers it effortlessly cuts through hard dirt and thick tree roots without making him tired at all. The soil becomes perfectly fluffy for planting. But before he can start farming, he knows he needs to find water and food. He walks through the forest listening for a river, but only hears the wind blowing through the leaves. He quickly realizes the forest is probably full of dangerous monsters and he needs a safe base. He spots a massive ancient tree towering over the rest of the forest and decides to make his camp there. Since he cannot find a river, he decides to dig a well right next to the tree. He summons wooden dowsing sticks to find a water vein underground. He does not really know how the sticks work but uses them anyway to pick a spot. Then he transforms his farming tool into a glowing yellow shovel. He tries to summon a complex excavator machine, but the tool only turns into simple hand tools. He uses the shovel to dig straight down into the earth. The tool makes the work completely effortless, and he easily digs a massive hole. Suddenly he realizes he dug way too deep and cannot climb out. Instead of panicking, he just uses the shovel to dig a diagonal tunnel upwards. His shovel hits something hard, and a geyser of fresh water erupts from the ground. He successfully secures a water source on his first try and climbs out of the hole. Hiraku realizes he is not hungry at all, which he guesses is another perk of the farming tool keeping his energy up. He decides to gather materials to build a shelter next. He transforms his tool into a white magical axe and walks up to a giant tree. He figures out where to cut and swings the axe. The tree instantly vanishes and falls over in a single strike. He is completely amazed by the power of the tool. He changes the tool into a hatchet and effortlessly strips the bark and branches off the massive log. He then transforms the tool into a hook to drag the heavy timber back to his camp. He realizes building a whole house from scratch without nails or glue is too hard for his very first day. As the sun starts to set, he panics because he needs a light source to survive the dark forest. He tries to summon a flashlight or a lighter, but the tool refuses to make them. He figures out it can only make things that do not deplete themselves over time. He tries again and successfully summons a magnifying glass. He uses the magnifying glass to focus the fading sunlight onto a pile of wood shavings and starts a small fire. He digs a hole into the trunk of the massive tree to use as a temporary shelter for the night. He sits inside his tree hollow, drinking water from a wooden cup he carved. He looks out into the night and notices he can see perfectly in the dark. He looks up at the sky and sees two moons, one blue and one purple, confirming he really is in another world. The next morning, Hiraku wakes up feeling completely rested. He uses the magnifying glass to start another fire. He begins clearing the area around his giant tree using a pickaxe. After working for a while, he finally starts to feel hungry. Suddenly, a giant gray rabbit monster with glowing red eyes and massive fangs charges out of the bushes straight at him. Panicking, Hiraku swings his scythe at the beast. The tool effortlessly slices the monster's neck, killing it instantly. He butchers the rabbit with a knife made from his tool and roasts the meat over his campfire. He eats the meat, noting that it tastes a bit gamey and bloody, but he is just grateful to have solid food. After eating, he realizes he needs a place to do his business. He uses his tools to build a proper wooden toilet. He digs a deep tank, makes a wooden seat, and installs ventilation pipes. He feels incredibly proud of his new civilized bathroom. With his basic needs met, he finally gets to work on his farm. He uses a silver-headed hoe to till a large rectangular field in the clearing. He thinks about all the vegetables he wants to grow, like potatoes, tomatoes, and corn. But then it hits him that he does not actually have any seeds or seedlings to plant. He assumes he will have to forage for them in the dangerous forest. The next morning, Hiraku wakes up and checks his empty field. To his absolute shock, vibrant green sprouts are already growing out of the dark soil. He realizes the plants in this world either grow without seeds, or the omnipotent farming tool magically planted them for him when he tilled the earth. He sees different types of sprouts, including some that look like green onions. Realizing he has a real farm now, he knows he has to protect it from the giant rabbits and other wild monsters. He spends the next few days working constantly. He chops down more trees and builds a sturdy wooden fence all the way around his fields. To be extra safe, he digs a deep trench right outside the fence. Several more giant rabbits try to attack him, but he easily kills them with his tools and uses them for food. He continues to water his mysterious sprouts every day using a special watering can created by his tool. The enchanted water makes the plants grow incredibly fast. After securing the fields, Hiraku decides he is tired of living inside a tree trunk. He spends days gathering more timber and figures out how to build a real log cabin. He digs a wooden trench to set the foundation, stacks heavy notched logs on top of each other, and lowers the floor inside to give himself more headroom. He builds a roof out of tree bark and secures it with wooden nails he carved himself. He adds a simple door and some small windows. He sits inside his new sturdy cabin and feels extremely satisfied with his progress. Days pass, and Hiraku notices some of his plants are growing delicate white flowers. He is having the time of his life and loves watching his crops grow. One afternoon, he is working near his fence when two massive black wolves with glowing red eyes walk out of the forest. He is startled at first, but quickly notices they are covered in scars and wounds. They do not look aggressive at all. He also notices that the female wolf has a huge swollen belly. Realizing they are starving, he grabs a wooden plank and makes a bridge over his trench so they can cross into his camp. He brings out a huge pile of raw boar meat that he hunted earlier and feeds it to the wolves. They happily eat the food. Hiraku sits by his cave and thinks about how he always wanted a dog as a kid. Suddenly, the female wolf lies down and starts panting heavily. Hiraku realizes she is going into labor right there in the dirt. Panicking about the cold and the dirt, he quickly moves both wolves inside his new log cabin so they can be safe and warm. He sets up a bonfire right outside the door to keep them warm and decides to sleep outside in his old tree trunk to give them privacy. He worries all night that he might have messed up, or that another monster might attack them while they are vulnerable. Eventually, he falls asleep against the stone wall. The next morning, Hiraku wakes up and realizes he slept through the entire night. He rushes over to the log cabin and peeks inside. He is amazed to see 4 tiny black wolf pups nursing from their mother. The male wolf sits proudly next to them. Hiraku is relieved that the delivery went well and cuts up the best parts of his remaining boar meat to feed the new parents as a celebration. He assumes the wolves will leave once they are healed, but they clearly love his farm and decide to stay. Since they have taken over his cabin, Hiraku just builds an even bigger and better cabin for himself next door. Once the pups are big enough to run around, Hiraku finally gets to harvest his first crops. He picks a massive juicy red tomato from the vines. He decides to name the adult wolves Kuro and Yuki, and the 4 pups Kurichi, Kuroni, Kurasan, and Kurion. He feeds some of his freshly harvested tomatoes to the wolves, and to his surprise, the meat-eating animals absolutely love the vegetables. The adult wolves start patrolling the farm and hunting for wild game to help out around the property. Hiraku looks at his thriving farm, his new wolf companions, and his fields full of food. He realizes he needs to build a storage hut for all the vegetables and make some furniture for his house, but for now, he is perfectly content with his new peaceful life. God watches Hiraku from afar and reflects on his situation. God knows he made a mistake in Hiraku's past life and gave him a terrible fate. Now he watches Hiraku living in the forest of death. God realizes this forest is extremely dangerous and filled with monsters. He wants to bring Hiraku back and apologize, but he knows interfering after a life has started goes against the rules. God just hopes that if Hiraku's soul ever returns, he can properly apologize for everything. Meanwhile, Hiraku evaluates the results of his farming. He discovers that he can grow crops without actually having any seeds. As long as he imagines the specific plant while using his farming tool to till the soil, the seeds magically appear in the ground. He successfully grows potatoes, onions, tomatoes, and cabbage this way. To test his theory further, he decides to think about bean sprouts while tilling. The soil immediately produces small green sprouts. He watches them grow rapidly over the next few days until they turn into full soybean plants. Hiraku notes that the crops grow incredibly fast, sometimes surprising him. However, he also makes some mistakes along the way. He notices that some of his potatoes turn green where the sun hits them. He remembers that green potatoes are poisonous, so he decides not to eat them. To fix the issue, he starts piling dark soil around the base of the potato plants to protect them from the sun. Hiraku realizes that farming requires a lot of practical knowledge, and he just has to learn from his mistakes as he goes. Feeling grateful for his new life, he carves 2 wooden statues to represent the gods and sets them up in a small shrine near his giant tree. He feels like his camp is slowly becoming more civilized. At lunchtime, Hiraku cooks a simple stew using rabbit meat and fresh vegetables from his garden. He just boils everything in a large pot over an open fire. He does not have any salt or spices, so the meal is very plain. He notes that draining the blood from the animals immediately after hunting makes the meat taste much better. He feeds the leftover meat to his 2 adult wolves, Kuro and Yuki. The wolves absolutely love the food, and Hiraku worries he might be spoiling them. He still wishes he could find some salt to improve the flavor of his meals. Later, Hiraku decides to expand his farm by planting some fruit trees. He uses his hoe to plant apples, pears, and persimmons. He knows that fruit trees take years to mature and bear fruit, but he is fully prepared to wait. Hiraku enjoys his daily life with the wolves. He constantly pets them and appreciates their company. He notices that the wolves have small horns on their heads, but he figures that is just normal for dogs in this new world. Having the wolves around is incredibly helpful because they know the forest perfectly and prevent him from getting lost. With their guidance, Hiraku explores deeper into the woods and eventually discovers a river with a small waterfall. This river can serve as a great water source for his farm. He plans to dig a canal from the waterfall all the way back to his camp. It is a 30-minute walk, so he knows it will take a lot of digging. He builds a small wooden toilet at the construction site so he does not have to walk all the way back home when he works. To speed up the travel time, he transforms his farming tool into a wooden wheelbarrow. He puts Kuro inside the wheelbarrow and starts running through the forest at top speed. However, he loses control and they both tumble right off a cliff. After recovering from the fall, Hiraku decides he needs to clear the paths and fix the roads before using the wheelbarrow again. Back at his main camp, he continues to clear the forest and expand his fields. He plants oilseed rape so he can harvest rapeseed oil for cooking. He also plants wheat because it is easy to preserve and can be ground into flour. He even plants sugarcane because he craves something sweet. He checks on his soybeans and wishes he could make edamame, but he really needs salt for that. He hopes to find some rock salt nearby. As time passes, the weather starts to get colder. Hiraku sees snow on the distant mountains and realizes winter is coming. He feels too cold in his simple clothes and needs to prepare for the freezing temperatures. He tries to make clothes out of the giant rabbit pelts, but they smell terrible and he worries they will rot. He decides his only option is to stockpile firewood and food so he can just stay inside his cabin all winter. One day, a massive black and white striped spider with red eyes appears at the edge of the farm. Hiraku panics and gets ready to fight the monster. However, Kuro completely ignores the spider and just sits there relaxing. The spider lowers itself to the ground and presents Hiraku with a beautiful white handkerchief featuring a red border and detailed embroidery. Hiraku is amazed by the high-quality cloth and thanks the spider. He names the giant spider Zabuton. Zabuton immediately moves into the giant tree and becomes part of the family. Her favorite food is potatoes. Zabuton proves to be incredibly useful because she can craft amazing clothes. Hiraku gives her the smelly rabbit pelts, and she magically transforms them into a warm fur-lined green winter coat for him. She also makes comfortable bed sheets stuffed with leaves and sews white curtains to block the cold wind from his windows. Hiraku feels extremely happy with his new civilized lifestyle. Winter finally arrives in full force, and snow covers the entire farm. Hiraku stays inside his cozy cabin while the wolves rest by the fire. Zabuton stays up in her tree hibernating for the season. The snow piles up heavily on the cabin's roof. Eventually, the weight becomes too much, and the roof collapses right into the living room. Hiraku manages to survive the incident and repairs the damage. Despite having plenty of food and warmth, the long winter takes a mental toll on him. He feels incredibly lonely and realizes he has not spoken to another person in a very long time. He fears he might actually forget how to talk. Eventually, the cold weather passes and the snow melts. Spring arrives, and Hiraku goes back to cooking vegetable stew outside. He notices the 4 wolf pups have grown into large adults with silver horns. One day, all 4 of the younger wolves leave the farm and head into the forest. Hiraku feels a bit sad watching them leave the nest. However, they return just a few days later, and each of them brings back a new mate. Around the same time, Zabuton climbs down from her tree accompanied by a massive swarm of tiny spider babies. Hiraku realizes Zabuton is actually a female. With the wolf pack doubling in size and a whole new generation of spiders, Hiraku's family grows significantly. He knows he has to work even harder to feed everyone, so he immediately starts expanding his crop fields and planting more seeds. While working in the fields, Hiraku hears a loud alarm. He looks over and sees one of Zabuton's babies hitting a wooden board with a mallet. Kuro runs up and barks, leading Hiraku deep into the forest. They arrive at a large tree and find a young girl with long white hair bound tightly in Zabuton's spiderwebs. The girl cries out for help. Hiraku is shocked to see another person, but is thrilled to finally hear a voice. He frees her from the webs, but she immediately lunges at him and bites his neck. She sucks his blood, and the energy allows her to transform from a small child into a full-grown woman wearing a black dress. She thanks Hiraku for saving her and notes that his blood is full of vitality. Suddenly, the wolves surround her and start barking furiously. The girl panics and gets caught in a massive dust cloud of barking wolves. The fear causes her to lose her energy, and she shrinks back down into her childlike form. Hiraku stops the wolves and asks the girl if she is an enemy. She angrily explains that she only attacked him because his dogs beat her up earlier. She used all her energy fighting them, so she needed his blood to heal and maintain her adult form. Hiraku feels bad that his wolves attacked her first, so he offers his neck and allows her to suck more of his blood. She takes a large amount, but Hiraku does not feel weak at all, crediting his magically healthy body. The girl transforms back into her adult form and introduces herself as Lulusi, a vampire. Lu looks around the farm and is completely amazed by the massive cornfields and lush crops hidden in the middle of the dangerous forest. She sees the tomato plants and asks if they are decorative. Hiraku explains they are tomatoes and uses his magic tool to cut one off the vine. He hands it to Lu and she takes a bite. She loves the juicy flavor and immediately asks to see the rest of his farm. Hiraku proudly shows her his towering corn stalks and his giant white radishes. Lu has a great time exploring the fields. As the sun sets, they head inside the cabin. Lu uses magic to organize her research. She explains that she is a researcher studying medicinal plants. She recently got into a fight with some nobles who tried to steal her work. They sent an assassin after her, so she fled into the forest of death to hide and continue her research. She admits the forest is extremely dangerous and she almost died until she found his farm. She asks Hiraku how he managed to tame such savage beasts, but Hiraku has no idea what she means, thinking his wolves are just normal dogs. Lu also asks about his farming tool, assuming it is a powerful magic artifact. She admits she has lived a very long life but still has much to learn. She asks Hiraku if she can stay at his farm for a while to continue her research. Hearing this, Hiraku suddenly realizes he does not want to be alone anymore. He loudly declares that he wants her to live with him forever. Lu is completely shocked and flustered by the sudden statement. She blushes heavily and tries to calm him down. Hiraku explains that he originally wanted to live isolated from society, but the loneliness of the winter almost broke him. He refuses to let this chance slip away. Lu argues that dangerous people are hunting her, but Hiraku says he does not care. She points out she is a vampire, but he still does not care. Seeing his sheer determination, Lu shyly agrees to stay. However, she mentions that the proposal was incredibly sudden since they just met. Hiraku gets confused and asks what she means by a proposal. Lu gets angry and yells that asking a girl to live with him forever is a marriage proposal. Hiraku gets embarrassed but quickly doubles down. He drops to his knees, presses his head against the floor in a deep bow, and begs her to stay with him. Lu smiles warmly and tells him to stop, confirming that she already said yes. Hiraku jumps up in celebration and grabs Lu, flying through the air with her on his back while she screams at him to slow down. The next morning, Hiraku works in a field of yellow flowers. Lu walks up to him back in her childlike form. She greets him with a smile, and Hiraku feels incredibly happy just hearing a simple good morning. He asks why she shrank again, and she explains it is a defense mechanism so he will not try to touch her inappropriately. Hiraku awkwardly promises to behave. They discuss the farm, and Hiraku mentions he wants to plant sweet potatoes next because they preserve well for the winter. He notes that he needs to grow more food now that she is the 30th villager. Lu gets confused by the title. Hiraku points to the massive wolf pack and the entire family of giant spiders, explaining that they all count as villagers who moved in before her. Lu laughs at the ridiculous village ranking. They then decide to test if the farm's soil can grow medicinal herbs. Lu says they need to find seeds first, but Hiraku smiles and tells her they do not actually need any seeds to grow things here. The following day, as Hiraku and Lu settle into their daily routine, Lu uses her magic to set up glowing lights inside the newly built wooden sheds. Hiraku is amazed by the bright magical lights, but Lu brushes it off as basic magic. Later, they sit by the massive tree to eat a hearty meal of thick meat and green asparagus. Hiraku notes the food has a very mild flavor because he cannot find any salt in the forest. He admits he has been looking everywhere and is ready to give up. Lu looks at him like he is completely crazy. She pulls out an old map and points directly to a spot right underneath their farm. She explains that the ground is full of rock salt and they just need to dissolve and boil it to get normal salt. Hiraku realizes he was digging right through the salt layers without even noticing. The next morning, Hiraku plans to check on the fruit trees. They walk over to the orchard while Kuro the horned wolf rests nearby on the dusty ground. Hiraku proudly looks at the young orange and peach saplings and tells Lu that he plans to plant chestnuts next. Lu is excited to see how they turn out. They sit on a log to drink herbal tea, and Hiraku admits he really wants to drink green tea. He remembers that oolong, black, and green tea all come from processing the exact same leaves, so he figures he can make it eventually. Suddenly, Hiraku hears a loud commotion deep in the forest. He spots a blonde girl with large white wings getting chased by Kuro's wolves. The wolves easily corner her, and she falls to the ground begging for mercy. Hiraku quickly steps in and calls the wolves off. The girl dusts herself off and thanks him. She immediately raises her hand, forms a glowing green orb on her fingertip, and shoots a massive beam of cyan magic into the forest to show off her power. Hiraku is totally amazed by her magical skills. Suddenly, Lu spots the blonde girl and tries to sneak away in a panic. The angel yells at Lu and demands she surrender quietly. Before the angel can capture Lu, the wolves swarm her again and beat her up in a massive cloud of dust. Hiraku runs over to stop the wolves from hurting her too much. They all head back to the cabin to calm down. The angel is badly bruised and complains about the awful experience. Lu agrees and admits the wolves did the exact same thing to her when she first arrived. The angel realizes she does not know who Hiraku is. Lu blushes heavily and proudly introduces him as her husband. The angel is completely shocked by the news. She then introduces herself as Tia, an angel. Hiraku assumes she serves God, but Tia gets very defensive. She claims angels are actually a proud race of warriors who fight Spartans, even though people used to worship them in the past. Hiraku asks why she is chasing Lu. Tia explains that Lu has a massive bounty on her head for destroying a town during a rampage. Lu defends herself, stating an annoying noble kept forcing her to make medicine and drugs incessantly, so she just wanted to teach him a little lesson. Tia argues that blowing up his estate was not a little lesson. Lu admits she might have gone too far. Lu quickly changes the subject and invites Tia to live with them on the farm. Tia is hesitant, but Lu promises to show her around the fields. Lu drags Tia outside and proudly shows off the massive vegetable fields and the fruit orchard. Tia is completely amazed by the quality of the crops. Then, Lu takes her into the dark cave to introduce Zabuton, the giant spider. Tia is so terrified that she instantly passes out and collapses on the dirt. Lu and Hiraku look down at her and figure she just hates spiders. Tia wakes up, and Lu immediately ropes her into helping with the harvest. Tia complains that an angel should not have to get her hands dirty with farm work. Hiraku ignores her complaints and tells them to start picking the cabbages. Tia picks up a massive green cabbage and struggles with its heavy weight. Hiraku tears off some fresh leaves, washes them, and sprinkles them with the newly extracted salt. Tia takes a bite and her eyes widen in pure shock. She absolutely loves the fresh taste. Hiraku agrees that homegrown vegetables are always the best. They spend the rest of the day harvesting huge baskets of cabbages, celery, and strawberries. They are all completely exhausted by the time the sun goes down. Tia realizes she really enjoyed the farm work. Lu grabs Tia's arm and begs her to stay permanently. Lu leans in close and whispers that her body cannot handle Hiraku all by herself every night. Tia turns bright red and gets incredibly flustered by the dirty comment. Tia decides to stay and helps out around the farm by using her magic to control massive stone golems. The golems carry heavy logs while Tia and Lu transport the freshly picked crops. Tia eats a bunch of strawberries and suggests they expand the fields so they can grow more. Hiraku explains they are already at maximum capacity and cannot harvest any more without extra help. Tia tells Lu to just work harder, but Hiraku worries they will not be able to finish eating everything they grow. They head over to the dog area and find a bunch of new wolf pups. The pups already have their horns growing in. Hiraku explains that Kuro and Yuki had pups, and those pups had more pups. There are so many wolves now that he cannot even come up with names for all of them. He worries the dog shed is getting way too small for the growing pack. Meanwhile, Zabuton's spiderlings are also growing up. Hiraku watches hundreds of tiny blue spiders use silk parachutes to fly away into the sky. They are leaving the farm to start their own journeys. However, a good number of spiderlings decide to stay behind in the cave with Zabuton. Later, Tia announces she needs to leave the farm for a few days. Hiraku worries she is abandoning them, but she promises she will not be gone long. A few days pass and Tia comes back with 7 high elf girls. They all wear matching green and white uniforms. They introduce themselves as Leah, Leaf, Lakat, Lise, Lili, Lita, and Lise. Hiraku points out their names sound very similar. Leah explains they are all related. The youngest is 300 years old, and the oldest is over 400. Tia explains they all share a tragic past. Their forest village was completely destroyed in a human war 200 years ago. Since then, they have been wandering the world looking for a safe place to settle down and repopulate their race. They beg Hiraku to let them stay on his land. Lu vouches for them, saying high elves are incredibly talented workers. Hiraku agrees to let them move in as long as everyone gets along. The elves thank him profusely. Leah asks about the other roommates living on the farm. Lu brings them into the cave and introduces Zabuton. Just like Tia, all the elves are completely horrified and pass out on the spot. Later, Lu introduces them to Kuro's massive wolf pack. Once again, all 7 elves faint from pure terror. Hiraku sighs, expecting exactly this kind of reaction. Since the population of the farm just spiked, they desperately need a new house. Hiraku plans to build a massive cabin for the 7 elves. He starts by digging a ditch and setting up a wooden fence. However, he quickly realizes the elves are master builders. One of the elves easily slices through a massive, unbreakable iron tree with a single sword strike. They flawlessly process the lumber and direct the entire construction process. Hiraku ends up just doing the basic digging, raking the ground, and carrying logs while the elves handle the complex architecture. In just 10 days, they finish a massive 2-story wooden log cabin. Tia and Lu are completely amazed by the beautiful building. Hiraku feels a little jealous of their skills but hopes to learn their techniques to upgrade his own small hut. The elves give Hiraku a full tour of the interior. The first floor has a massive open living room and dining area where everyone can eat together. There are large storage rooms on the sides filled with ropes and baskets. The second floor holds all their individual bedrooms. The entire place is lit up with glowing magic orbs. Hiraku looks down from the balcony and hopes the elves will finally feel safe and at peace here. The elves quickly adapt to farm life and help harvest massive baskets of green onions. Hiraku is shocked to see them casually eating raw garlic and onions straight from the dirt. He mentions he thought elves were supposed to be peaceful nature lovers who hate fire and only eat fruit. Leah laughs out loud and calls his idea completely silly. Lu scolds Hiraku for underestimating nature, explaining that living peacefully in the forest without using fire is a quick way to die. Hiraku realizes the elves are actually hardcore survivalists. To thank Hiraku for taking them in, Leah offers to do some blacksmithing. Hiraku always thought dwarves handled metalwork, but the elves quickly build a stone furnace. They gather iron sand from the river, burn charcoal and melt the iron down. They hammer the glowing metal and easily forge a brand new cooking pan. Hiraku is thrilled to see their civilization advancing and praises the elves for knowing how to do absolutely everything. Leah cheerfully admits the only thing they could not do while wandering the forest was repopulate. Hiraku remembers Lu's dirty comment and decides to keep his mouth shut about that. The elves continue gathering medicinal herbs in the forest. Leah spots a wheat field and asks if they can use it. Hiraku explains they already harvested the wheat and stored all the flour. Leah pulls out a ceramic jar filled with natural yeast and asks if she can bake some bread. Hiraku eagerly agrees to let her try. The elves mix the flour and yeast, shape the dough, wrap it around wooden sticks, and roast them over an open fire pit. The result is delicious spiral bread. Hiraku takes a big bite and is completely amazed by the taste. The elves and Tia absolutely love it too. Hiraku decides he definitely needs to expand the wheat fields now. While eating, Hiraku suddenly gets worried about the land. He asks Lu if the forest actually belongs to anyone. He fears the demon lord might get angry about him building a massive farm and taking over the territory. Lu asks if Hiraku received any help or official permission when he started building his farm. Hiraku says no. Lu confidently states that since he built it all entirely on his own, the land belongs completely to him. Hiraku feels a wave of relief. That night, Lu, Tia, and Leah sit around the table eating fresh tomatoes and cucumbers. They talk about how incredibly special Hiraku is. Tia is amazed he managed to tame inferno wolves and a demon spider without any trouble. Leah points out his incredible farming skills and the high quality of the soil. However, they all agree he is completely clueless about the world, especially since he did not even know what angels were. Meanwhile, Hiraku sits alone in the dimly lit cabin. He stares at his wooden mug and thinks about his next big project. He decides he needs to build a proper waterway for the farm and plans to ask the elves for their help the next morning. The following day, Hiraku gets right to work with his almighty farming tool. He notices that Zabuton the giant spider has captured a massive queen bee wearing a tiny gold crown. The giant bee is completely bound in thick webbing and looks terrified. Hiraku is surprised and asks Zabuton if she plans to eat it or keep it as a pet. Zabuton indicates that the bee is harmless now and won't fight back, so Hiraku decides to make a home for it. He uses his tools to build a wooden bee box near the orchard, hoping the bee will establish a colony. Within 10 days, the queen bee builds a huge nest inside the box, and normal-sized worker bees start flying around to do their jobs. Tia peeks into the shed, gets completely terrified by the giant swarming nest, and runs away in a panic. Hiraku figures she must have a bad history with bees, but he ignores her and focuses on the potential for harvesting honey, considering planting a flower garden nearby to help the bees out. Later, Hiraku and Leah check out the massive reservoir pit he dug out earlier. He explains his plan to draw water from the river to the reservoir, but admits he hasn't figured out the building materials yet. Since the river is far away, a wooden waterway would leak too much water through the gaps. Hiraku gets an idea and uses his farming tool in the form of a large mallet. He smashes the leftover dirt from the reservoir pit, magically compacting it into solid, concrete-like U-shaped blocks. The elves quickly jump in to help mass-produce these blocks. They build an intake gate at the waterfall, lay down a solid dirt foundation, and carefully place the rectangular stone-like channels all the way to the farm. The construction finishes much faster than expected thanks to the elves carrying the heavy materials on their yokes. Water finally flows into the reservoir, meaning they no longer have to haul water from the well every day. As the water pours in, small silver fish with vicious sharp teeth start jumping out of the aqueduct and flopping onto the wooden platform. Hiraku realizes these are the dangerous fish from the Forest of Death, but he is just thrilled to finally have some seafood. He cleans the fish, skewers them on wooden sticks, and roasts them over an open campfire outside the cave. Lu and Tia are extremely hesitant to eat monsters from the deadly forest, so they decline his offer at first. Hiraku takes a bite and discovers it tastes exactly like delicious salmon. Seeing him enjoy it, the girls finally try a bite. Their fear instantly turns to joy as they devour the grilled fish, crying tears of happiness over how delicious it is. The other elves notice the amazing smell and gather around, so Hiraku happily shares the rest of his catch with everyone. They end up catching a lot more fish from the aqueduct and preserving them with salt for the winter storage. Sometime later, Hiraku discovers a patch of golden rice stalks growing in his field. He realizes that when he tilled the soil while thinking about rice, the almighty farming tool magically produced the crop out of nowhere. Eager to grow a proper batch, he grabs his hoe and announces he is going to build a rice paddy. The elves are confused, having never seen a flooded crop field before. Hiraku goes all out, swinging his hoe with immense power to dig a massive trench. The intense energy from his swings shakes the entire forest, leaving the elves watching in absolute awe. He then floods the new trench with water from the reservoir, creating a large muddy pond. The elves dip their feet in the water, finding the slimy mud a bit strange but fun. Hiraku hands out bundles of bright green rice seedlings and shows everyone how to plant them in neat rows. The girls get the hang of it quickly, and soon the entire paddy is perfectly planted. To keep pests away, Hiraku enlists Zabuton's tiny spiderlings to stand guard over the water. Thanks to the fresh water and the magical farming tool, the rice grows incredibly fast, turning golden and ready for harvest almost immediately. Hiraku summons a magical sickle, and with the help of the energetic elves, they harvest the entire paddy in a flash. Hiraku hangs the golden bundles on wooden racks to dry in the sun, explaining the moisture removal process to Leah. Once the rice is completely dry, he brings it all inside the storage cabin to begin the grueling threshing process. He builds an old-fashioned wooden threshing machine with metal spikes to strip the grains from the stalks. After showing the girls how it works, they run the grains through a wooden sieve to remove the loose leaves. Next, they use a heavy stone mortar and a wooden pestle to pound the grains, removing the husks and polishing the white rice inside. The entire process takes hours of intense manual labor, leaving Tia completely exhausted and slumped over the counter. She complains about the ridiculous amount of work required just to make the food edible. Hiraku finally presents a glowing mound of perfectly polished white rice, but tells them the work isn't over yet because it still needs to be cooked. He sets up a heavy metal pot with a wooden lid over a stone stove. He explains the traditional method of cooking rice, noting that it requires a slow, low flame to start. He asks Lu to use her magic to light the fire. Lu gets overly excited and summons a massive, terrifying dark magic spell, boasting about blasting things to smithereens. Hiraku panics and yells at her to use a gentle flame, and after getting the fire under control, the rice cooks perfectly, releasing a massive cloud of delicious-smelling steam when Hiraku lifts the lid. The girls are skeptical that all this effort was worth it just for some plain white grains. To prove them wrong, Hiraku grabs the sticky rice and molds it into large triangles, stuffing the center with the salted, grilled salmon from earlier. He hands the steaming rice balls to Lu and Tia. They take a bite and are instantly blown away by the incredible flavor. The salty fish pairs perfectly with the fluffy rice, sending them into a state of pure bliss. The other elves eagerly eat their portions, completely falling in love with the meal. Sitting by the fire and watching everyone enjoy the food, Hiraku feels an overwhelming sense of pride and happiness, declaring this his best moment as a farmer yet. After a long day of working in the muddy rice paddy, Hiraku's clothes and skin are covered in dirt. The elves simply use a quick cleaning spell to instantly remove all the mud from their bodies, leaving Hiraku incredibly jealous. He wipes his foot with a rag and admits he really misses taking a hot bath. The girls are confused by the concept, suggesting they just wash in the nearby river. Hiraku argues that the river will be way too cold in the winter, and he passionately insists that hot baths are essential for good health and circulation. The girls agree to help him build one. Hiraku draws up a blueprint in the dirt, outlining a furnace to heat the water, a massive wooden tub, a washing area, and a changing room. They immediately get to work, using the farming tool to compact dirt into sturdy blocks for the furnace and the building's foundation. They connect the plumbing to the new aqueduct, and everything seems to be going perfectly until Hiraku realizes a major problem. He points out that dumping their dirty, soapy bathwater back into the river would pollute the environment. Lu quickly solves the issue by suggesting they use slimes. She explains that slimes eat waste and purify water perfectly. Hiraku is terrified, remembering video games where slimes are deadly monsters that kill new adventurers. Tia reassures him that slimes are harmless and immediately flies off to catch some. She returns with several bouncy blue slimes. Hiraku offers one to Kuro and Zabuton to see if they want to eat it, but they just stare at it. Hiraku sets up a stone purification pool at the end of the wastewater pipe and dumps the slimes inside so they can filter the bathwater. Tia then cheerfully suggests putting slimes inside the outhouses to clean the toilets as well. Hiraku is glad the waste problem is solved, but he admits he feels extremely nervous about using the bathroom right over a living monster's head. With the bathhouse nearly finished, Hiraku heads to the woodpile to grab some firewood for the furnace. He spots some wild mushrooms growing on the logs and hesitates. He confesses he has been terrified to eat any mushrooms in the forest because he cannot tell which ones are poisonous. Lu confirms his fears, stating that wild mushrooms are incredibly deceptive and dangerous. The elves offer to just destroy all the mushrooms with their swords to keep him safe, but Hiraku has a better idea. He uses his farming tool as a hammer, gently tapping the logs while focusing his mind on safe, edible mushrooms like shiitake and shimeji. The logs instantly sprout perfectly safe crops. Hiraku is thrilled and plans to make a delicious mushroom hot pot for dinner, but he quickly remembers he needs to finish the bath first. He fires up the furnace and thick smoke rises from the chimney as the water heats up. He gathers the girls outside the bathhouse to explain the rules. He tells them they must take off their clothes in the changing room, then rinse and wash their bodies in the washing area before finally stepping into the tub. The girls are still a bit confused and ask him to demonstrate the process. Hiraku is extremely flustered by the request but agrees. He strips down, goes through the washing steps, and finally sinks into the steaming hot tub. As the warm water soaks into his muscles, he enters a state of pure relaxation. He remembers his past life, stuck in a hospital bed with an IV drip, entirely unable to take a proper bath. He feels incredibly grateful for this new life. Suddenly, his peaceful moment is interrupted when Lu, Tia, and the elves throw off their towels and gleefully jump into the tub completely naked. They love the warm water and suggest it makes sense to bathe together so they don't have to reheat the tub. Hiraku is far too embarrassed to be surrounded by so many naked women, so he awkwardly makes an excuse and leaves the bathhouse early. Looking back at the steaming building, he heavily regrets not building separate bathrooms for men and women. Later, Kuro and his wolf pack return to the farm, escorting 5 brand new high elf girls. The newcomers introduce themselves as Lafa, Lasa, Lalasha, Lalu, and Lami. Hiraku notices they all have very similar names, and one of the girls explains they are all related. They reveal they are survivors from the same destroyed village as Leah's group. They have been wandering the dangerous forest for 200 years, desperately searching for a safe place to live. When they ask to join the farm, Hiraku warmly welcomes them without hesitation. The new elves are overjoyed and immediately declare they want to help expand the houses. They also enthusiastically announce they need to start making babies to repopulate their race. Hiraku forces a smile, sweating nervously at their aggressive optimism, but he is just happy the farm is growing. As the girls celebrate, Kuro watches them and reflects on his own journey. He remembers his past life, wandering the dense forest completely alone. He was a dominant alpha who never lost a fight and lived only to hunt. Everything changed when he met a terrifying female wolf named Yuki. She completely overpowered him in a fight, and he submitted to her. They became mates and started traveling together. Soon after, Yuki became pregnant, and Kuro looked forward to starting a family. However, their luck ran out when they crossed paths with the grappler bear, the undisputed king of the forest. The bear heavily wounded them, leaving them too weak to hunt. Driven away by their former prey, the injured wolves fled to the absolute center of the forest, a place so dangerous even the bear avoided it. There they stumbled upon Hiraku. Kuro was shocked that a weak-looking human could survive in such a deadly place, but then he sensed the limitless divine power radiating from Hiraku's farming tool. Fully expecting to be killed, the wolves surrendered to their fate. Instead, Hiraku healed them, built them a home, and fed them incredible meals, even sharing the highly prized meat of a great boar. Realizing his kindness, Kuro and Yuki pledged their absolute loyalty to the human, claiming him as their master. Over time, their pups grew, and the pack multiplied into a massive army. Now Kuro watches his master effortlessly command angels, elves, and a giant demon spider. Kuro realizes that Hiraku has no idea that his loyal dogs are actually legendary terrifying monsters known as Inferno Wolves. Despite this misunderstanding, Kuro doesn't care. He playfully sticks his tongue out, overwhelmingly thankful that his terrible misfortune eventually led him to the best master in the world. The new house is finally complete, and Hiraku stands outside with Leah and the other elf girls to admire the massive 2-story log mansion they just built. They talk about how huge the structure turned out, and note that they all helped design it to ensure everyone's requests were addressed. The elves are thrilled to see the final result, especially since they wanted Hiraku to have the nicest house in the village. They start a tour of the interior, and Hiraku points out that the inside structure looks a lot like the house Leah previously lived in. They walk into the main hall on the first floor. They designed this as a large gathering space for everyone to hang out and chat. Right across from the main hall is Hiraku's personal room. They continue the tour and head into the dining room. This room features a long wooden table and a stone fireplace. Towards the back of the first floor is the kitchen. They even set up additional stone stoves outside for extra cooking space. Next, they head down a wooden staircase to check out the cellar they dug out earlier. The elves note that the dark basement will be perfect for storing their food and firewood. Moving to the second floor, the girls get extremely excited to see their own private rooms. The old cabin was getting way too crowded for them. While walking down the hallway, Hiraku notices one sturdy wooden door with a heavy bolt lock on it. He questions why they put a lock like that on a bedroom door. He decides to just pretend he didn't see it and moves on. The group then heads into the bathroom and finds a large wooden bathtub. They look out the large window and admire the view of the massive tree outside. The tree makes them feel like it's watching over them. Hiraku tells the elves to let him know if they find anything unsatisfactory after spending the winter here. He wants to fix any issues they find. Outside the house, Hiraku uses his magic to transform a couple of stone golems into metallic statues of his horned wolves. He places the 2 statues on pedestals right in front of the mansion's main entrance. These statues act as guardians, and he feels very satisfied with how the new homestead is shaping up. Later, Hiraku heads to the kitchen with a plate of raw meat and some vegetables. He tells Lu and Tia that he wants to try making a completely new dish called curry. The girls have never heard of it and ask if it's difficult to make. Hiraku explains that it takes a lot of work to master from scratch. Lu jokingly assumes he has weird and savage tastes. Hiraku ignores her and takes them out to the crop fields to show them the ingredients. He explains that his almighty farming tool allows him to grow plants that are normally very sensitive to seasonal weather. He can cultivate crops that shouldn't survive in this climate. They gather the spices needed for the curry. Hiraku starts by showing them cumin. He explains that they use the dried seeds left behind after the flower blooms. This spice provides the main aroma for the dish. Leah smells the seeds and finds the scent very peculiar. Next, he shows them turmeric. He points out that they only use the underground root. They dry the root and use it to give the curry its vibrant yellow color. Hiraku mentions that he had the girls use their magic to dry the spices out for him. He then moves on to coriander and explains that they grind the seeds into a powder to get a fresh aroma. He also notes that the green leaves of the coriander plant are called cilantro. He lets the wolves sniff the cilantro, but the strong smell immediately repels them. The dogs roll around in the dirt to get away from it. Tia and Lu are shocked to discover a simple plant capable of driving off powerful inferno wolves. They decide it's worth researching later. Finally, Hiraku gathers black pepper and cayenne peppers to finish his spice collection. As he holds his bags of spices, he suddenly remembers a rumor. He heard that girls find guys who make curry from scratch to be a pain. He decides to push forward anyway and sets up all his ingredients on an outdoor cooking table. He notices that Leah is his only helper and asks where the others went. Leah happily explains that Lu and Tia are busy researching an all-powerful magical protection talisman. It's just the 2 of them cooking today. Hiraku starts the cooking process by heating up some extracted rapeseed oil in a large metal pan. He adds the rabbit meat to the hot oil. While the meat cooks, he tells Leah to grind up all the spices except for the cumin. Once the meat gets a nice golden color, Hiraku takes it off the heat so it doesn't overcook. He tosses the cumin seeds into the pan to cook in the leftover meat juices. He explains that this brings out the flavor without burning them. As the smell of the curry starts to fill the air, Leah is amazed by the unique scent. Hiraku adds finely diced onions, ginger, and garlic to the pan. He sautés them carefully until they form a nice paste. He tosses in diced tomatoes and continues cooking the mixture. Once the base is ready, he dumps all the ground spices and some salt into the pan. He cooks it a little more before adding the rabbit meat, boiled soybeans, and water. He covers the pot with a wooden lid and tells Leah they just need to let it simmer. While they wait, Hiraku suddenly realizes he completely forgot to make naan bread to go with the curry. He debates just making rice instead, but he really wants naan. He quickly starts preparing the dough. He calculates the portions needed for everyone and realizes he has to make a massive amount. He kneads the dough and lets it rise. He hands Leah a wooden rolling pin and shows her how to flatten the pieces out. He doesn't have a proper oven, so he decides to cook the flatbread by sticking the dough directly onto the hot outside surface of an overturned metal pot. As the food cooks, the delicious smell attracts the other elf girls and the wolves. They peek over the bushes in anticipation. Once the bread is done and the curry finishes simmering, Hiraku serves the meal to the group as the sun sets. Lu and Tia are a bit hesitant to try the weird-colored stew. Hiraku encourages them to just scoop it up with the flatbread. The girls take a bite and are instantly blown away by the flavor. They find the spicy kick highly addictive and absolutely love the meal. The other elves share the same reaction and devour their portions with blissful smiles. Hiraku is thrilled that his authentic curry is a success. He asks them to save a little for him, but he realizes they've eaten almost everything. He gives the last remaining scraps to Kuro and the wolves. The dogs find it a bit too spicy but still eat it quickly. Hiraku is completely sold out of food again, but he feels happy that everyone liked it. As the weather grows colder, winter approaches and the snow begins to fall. Hiraku knows they will be spending most of their days inside the house. He rushes to finish their winter preparations and gathers a massive amount of firewood. He stacks it neatly in the storage shed. He then visits Zabuton. The giant spider is preparing to go into hibernation at the top of the giant tree. Hiraku gives her a large basket of potatoes and brings a cart full of extra blankets to keep her warm. Meanwhile, Leah and the elves continue working on building a forge and handling other construction projects. Lou and Tia use their magic to smoke and dry large quantities of seasoned meat. Kuro and the dogs won't be able to hunt effectively in the deep snow, so they need the extra food. Hiraku tries to take some of the meat, but the wolves snatch it right out of his hands. To preserve their vegetable harvest, Hiraku builds a large wooden snow storage structure. He explains that he puts the vegetables in the top compartments and covers them with a sheet. He lets the snow pile on top of the sheet. The bottom boxes are left empty to catch any melting snow. This keeps the vegetables dry and fresh all winter. Later, Hiraku watches Lou use her fire magic and decides he wants to try casting spells too. He stands outside and tries to shoot wind magic from his hands, but absolutely nothing happens. He admits he knew it wouldn't work, but seeing the girls use magic every day made him want to try. That night in the cabin, Lou tells him that even a basic ignition spell requires studying magic. Hiraku complains that Tia makes it look so easy when she summons massive stone golems to carry wooden logs around the forest. Lou points out that Tia's golems are highly advanced magic. Hiraku feels a bit useless and claims all he does is garden and cook while the others do amazing things. Lou reassures him and states that surviving out here is something no one else could ever do. She calls him the most amazing person in the village. The snow finally piles up and forces everyone to stay indoors. To pass the time, Hiraku carves several wooden board games like reversi, chess, and mahjong. He introduces reversi to the girls and explains the simple rules. Players just need to surround their opponent's pieces to flip the colors, and the player with the most pieces wins. Lou thinks the game sounds far too simple. Tia argues that the simple design allows for complex strategies, so they decide to play a match against each other. As the game progresses, Tia realizes she is losing badly. In a fit of frustration, she flips the entire board and scatters the pieces everywhere. She claims her hand slipped. Lou just sighs and uses her magic to instantly levitate the pieces. She places them perfectly back on the board to prevent Tia from resetting the match. Hiraku decides to play best of 3 to keep the peace. Later, Hiraku finds a blonde elf girl playing chess against Kuro. He is absolutely stunned to see the massive black wolf actually understanding the rules and making brilliant strategic moves. The wolves emit a terrifying aura of intense concentration while playing. Hiraku realizes they are incredible at the game. Lou tries to challenge Kuro to a match of reversi, but she gets completely defeated. She huddles in the corner in depression because she doesn't have the courage to flip the board on the giant wolf. Next, they try playing mahjong. Hiraku assumes the game is too complicated for Kuro to understand, but he is quickly proven wrong. Kuro calls a winning hand, and the tiles light up with magical energy. Kuro wins with a massive 13 orphans hand and completely depletes all of Hiraku's points. Hiraku sits on the floor in defeat and acknowledges that Kuro is the absolute master of games. To get everyone moving, Hiraku builds a mini wooden bowling alley inside the cabin. He carves 10 wooden pins and paints comical villain faces on them. He labels them as scam artists, arsonists, and serial killers. Lou asks why they are knocking them down, and Hiraku explains that it gives them a reason to defeat the bad guys. Hiraku rolls a wooden ball down the red carpet and knocks down several pins. The girls cheer enthusiastically, and the bowling game becomes a massive hit. They spend the rest of the winter cozily playing games and eating warm hot pot together. Eventually, the snow melts and spring arrives. Hiraku steps out of the cabin into the warm morning sun. He is excited to start planting crops again. He meets up with Lou and Tia to discuss their plans for the day. Hiraku mentions that it's time to wake Zabuton from her hibernation since they still have some potatoes left for her. Someone suddenly strikes a wooden plaque to sound an alarm. The group looks up into the clear blue sky and spots a massive winged creature flying straight toward the farm. Hiraku panics and thinks it's a dragon. Tia quickly identifies it as a dangerous wyvern, and Lou stares in shock at the approaching monster. Before the wyvern can even attack, a colossal beam of cyan magical energy erupts from the ground and strikes the beast head-on. The overwhelming blast instantly vaporizes the wyvern and completely disintegrates it into glowing particles. After the wyvern is completely destroyed, Hiraku and the girls carefully walk through the dense evergreen forest to check the village for any damage. They quickly manage to put out all the scattered fires caused by the intense magical battle. The crop fields take a little bit of damage from the explosions, but all the surrounding buildings are perfectly fine. Hiraku walks past a massive ancient tree trunk and wonders if someone specifically sent the wyvern to attack them. The elves explain that wild wyverns usually act completely alone, and sending such a rare and valuable creature by itself makes absolutely no sense. they easily conclude that this was just a rare and unfortunate incident. With the terrible danger finally gone, Hiraku wonders if they can actually eat the giant monster. They butcher the colossal beast and have a massive feast inside the rustic log cabin. Hiraku uses a pair of wooden chopsticks to grill thick wyvern round steaks with rich spices in a sizzling pan. He wraps the breast meat in large green leaves and steams it to perfection, and simmers the tough tail meat into a hearty vegetable stew. Everyone eagerly gathers around the large wooden table to dig in. Lu takes a bite and blushes with absolute delight, completely shocked by how tender the meat is. She points out that a regular knife couldn't even pierce the wyvern's thick skin, making Hiraku's power even more impressive. They all feel incredibly blessed to enjoy such a delicious meal together in complete safety. Meanwhile, news of the wyvern's sudden defeat reaches the demonic kingdom of Galgardo. Inside the grand hall of the demon lord's castle, the 4 great generals are completely shocked. Beezle sits distressed on his throne while Randon and the heavily armored Gratz sit at a long wooden table. They simply can't believe a creature that requires their entire military force to defeat was killed in just 2 hits from the ground. Randon gets incredibly frustrated and clutches his head in a panic because they just finished getting the current year's budget approved. He firmly slams his hands on the table and immediately suggests they should all safely resign before the citizens find out and start panicking. At the same time, the gatekeeper Dragon Drime and his assistant Gucci watch the event from their remote mountain lair. Gucci asks what would actually happen if the massive blue dragon Drime took a direct hit like that. Drime exhales a puff of white vapor and freely admits that the magical attack would easily pierce right through him. They decide it would be incredibly foolish to ever attack the village and choose to leave them entirely alone. Back at the village, the peaceful days quickly continue. Hiraku decides it's finally time to make some alcohol to go with their meals. Since they have a massive harvest of dark purple grapes, he plans to make wine. He has the high elf Lalasha build several watertight wooden barrels for the long fermentation process. The elf girls enthusiastically harvest all the ripe grapes using shears and bring them to a massive wooden vat. Hiraku explains that they need to step inside and stomp the grapes to crush them properly. The girls step into the vat, hold onto a central wooden beam, and start treading on the fruit, causing vibrant purple juice to splash everywhere against their legs. They struggle to stay balanced, and the blonde elf girl accidentally bumps into her purple-haired companion. To keep everyone's movements in sync, they decide to start singing a traditional working song from their old village. The rhythmic stomping quickly turns into a highly entertaining activity, and soon Lu and Tia eagerly join in on the grape crushing. Hiraku uses a large wooden beam to directly press the crushed pink slime into the wooden barrels. Several other elf girls, including Sylvia, Kazuna, Himekawa, and Eurytia, join the fun and joyfully stomp on the fruit as the sun sets over the forest. Sylvia sits on the wooden steps to wring out her wet stocking and mentions how exhausted she is from all the fun. They successfully fill 16 large barrels with the grape mash and leave them outside so the natural yeast on the grape skins can ferment the juice. Far away in the cosmic realm, the goddess of agriculture furiously yells at the god of the world. She is extremely angry because he carelessly gave Hiraku a replica of the holy Lansgrime to use as a simple farming tool. She fiercely complains that the legendary weapon should have instantly drained Hiraku's life force and killed him. The god nervously defends himself, claiming he gave Hiraku a super fast recovery ability and a perfectly healthy body to handle the immense strain. The goddess refuses to accept his careless excuses. She is also incredibly mad because her corresponding statue in the human world looks exactly like an old man with a beard. As punishment for his extreme recklessness, she traps the god in a magical barrier and forces him to sit there for 300 years. Back at the village, a white-haired vampire girl named Flora suddenly arrives in the forest. She finds Lu tightly bound to a tree trunk by white bandages and calls her dear sister. Flora explains she followed Tia all the way there because she heard the black-hearted angel was chasing Lu. Tia overhears this and gets incredibly angry at being called black-hearted. Flora asks why Tia is even allowed to be there. Lu quickly clears up the misunderstanding and completely shocks Flora by explaining that Hiraku is actually her husband. Flora is highly skeptical of Hiraku at first, but she immediately changes her tune when she spots Kuro and the other Inferno wolves resting nearby. Terrified of the incredibly powerful magical beasts, she immediately falls to the ground and begs for forgiveness for her rude behavior. Hiraku warmly welcomes her and invites her to stay for dinner as an apology for scaring her. He serves her a hot meal featuring a strange white substance called tofu, along with warm miso soup and savory soy sauce. Flora is completely amazed by the incredible flavors and asks how it's all made. Hiraku explains that miso and soy sauce are made from fermented soybeans. Since Flora is highly passionate about her research, she instantly becomes obsessed with the fascinating idea of microscopic organisms altering food without the use of magic. She hastily leaves the village to carefully gather her research materials so she can move in permanently. 1 month later, Flora returns to the village with a large group of ogre maids led by a woman named Anne. She also brings several cows to provide fresh milk for the village, which makes Hiraku incredibly excited to start making butter and cheese. Shortly after, Tia loudly announces she has also brought her subordinates to live with them. 3 heavily armored angel guards named Gran Maria, Kudel, and Caron formally introduce themselves one by one. Tia also brings a group of muscular green lizardmen led by Daga. The lizardmen even bring a live brown chicken in a small wooden cage, meaning the village will finally have a steady supply of eggs. With so many new residents, Hiraku quickly assigns everyone specific roles to keep things perfectly organized. The ogre maids take over the cleaning and cooking duties around the large cabin. Hiraku teaches them various advanced cooking methods like frying, deep frying, braising, and steaming. He even shows them how to properly control the heat to cook a killer rabbit with fragrant vegetables. The maids are incredibly strong and polite, making them absolutely perfect for the job. Tia assigns her angel guards to constantly patrol the skies and keep strict watch over the surrounding forest to spot any threats. The muscular lizardmen are put in charge of the heavy outdoor labor and construction projects. Hiraku ties a red scarf around Daga's arm so he can easily tell him apart from the other identical lizardmen. Thanks to the extra help, the village expands at an incredible rate, adding new crop fields and multiple houses to the growing area. Just when Hiraku thinks they have enough people, the high elf Leia suddenly arrives with another massive group of female elves. She excitedly explains that these are the remaining survivors who were wandering the dangerous forest. Hiraku notices there are absolutely no men among them and asks about it. Leia casually brushes his concern off, confidently stating that they can just start making more men now. This makes Hiraku incredibly nervous, so he firmly decides not to ask her any further questions about her weird plan. A few days later, Hiraku gathers all the group representatives in the main wooden hall. Anne, Lu, Daga, Kuro, Zabuton, and the elves all listen closely as Hiraku points out that the area has grown from a single hut into a bustling town, so it's time to officially name the village. The girls quickly suggest naming it after him, but Hiraku hates the sound of Mashio Town or Hiraku Village. He suggests naming it after the surrounding forest instead. The elves casually inform him that the area is actually called the Forest of Death. Hiraku immediately rejects the terrifying idea of living in the Village of Death, fearing it sounds exactly like a ghost town filled with poison swamps. He walks over to the large sliding doors and pushes them wide open, revealing the massive ancient trees standing beautifully in the center of their settlement. He loudly announces that they will officially call their new home the Great Tree Village. To celebrate the official naming of the village, Hiraku throws a massive outdoor party for absolutely everyone. They open the very first batch of wine they made and serve it to the massive crowd in wooden mugs. The elves and lizardmen cheer enthusiastically and immediately start calling Hiraku the mayor. Hiraku gets highly flustered and insists they need to properly vote on a mayor later, but the girls tell him he is the only person fit for the job. Hiraku happily accepts the title and unleashes a massive pillar of magical fire to light the giant bonfire. The joyful celebration kicks into high gear as the villagers feast, dance, and drink the night away. Flora spends the entire party happily inspecting the fermented wine with a magnifying glass to study the yeast. The strong alcohol quickly knocks out the inferno wolves and they sprawl across the sandy ground in a deep drunken sleep with white bubbles coming from their noses. Lu also drinks way too much wine and totally passes out on a picnic table. Tia frantically rubs her head against the table in a comical display of frustration at Lu's drunken behavior. Hiraku eventually sits by the warm fire with Tia and quietly remarks that his new life feels exactly like a wonderful dream. Tia smiles warmly at him and firmly assures him that it's all completely real and they will continue to live happily together. They clink their wooden mugs together in a cheerful toast to the Great Tree Village. Suddenly, a drunken Lu wakes up and loudly complains that they started the toast without her. She aggressively demands another round of wine, and everyone laughs happily as the festive party continues late into the beautiful night. In the time between winter and summer, the number of residents in the Great Tree Village increases again, and Hiraku fully settles into his role as the mayor, while his daily routine of farming remains mostly the same. While Hiraku is harvesting crops in the garden near the massive world tree, Tia suddenly flies down to inform him that a messenger from the demonic kingdom has arrived. Hiraku is surprised by the sudden visit and goes to meet the envoy. The messenger introduces himself as Beezle and states that he wants to have an audience with the person in charge. Hiraku steps forward, feeling nervous since this is his very first real job as the mayor. Beezle is taken aback that Hiraku is the leader, but he quickly accepts it and presents a glowing green medicine called Almighty as a gift from the Demon Lord to commemorate their meeting. He then explains that the Demon Lord wants to discuss the status of the settlement. Since the village is technically on the Demon Lord's land, Hiraku worries that they might be asked to pay massive taxes or even face eviction. He considers asking Lu and Tia for advice but decides to handle the negotiations himself to prove he is a capable mayor. Hoping to show that he has no intention of rebelling, Hiraku boldly offers to pay 10% of their total harvest as a tax. Beezle is completely stunned by this offer and quickly agrees to the terms before Hiraku can change his mind. They sign a formal contract, but Hiraku makes sure the tax only applies to the crops they grow in the fields, meaning they will not give the Demon Lord any milk, eggs, honey, or alcohol unless they enter separate trade negotiations. After the deal is finalized, Hiraku gives Beezle a bundle of fresh apples and a special cloth made by Zabuton as a parting gift. Once Beezle leaves, Hiraku worries that he might have been too aggressive, but Lu assures him that he did a great job. She explains that the normal tax rate is usually around 50 or 60%, so securing the Demon Lord's protection for under 10% is a massive victory. Furthermore, since the tax collectors will only come once a year, they will never truly know the actual size of the village's harvest. Meanwhile, back at the Demon Lord's castle, the four great generals are in an absolute panic. Beezle reports his findings to Gratz and Randan, explaining that the village possesses a terrifying military force. Randan suspects that the villagers might have ulterior motives for submitting to the Demon Lord so easily, but Beezle explains that he had absolutely no choice but to accept their terms. He reveals that the village is home to the legendary vampire princess Lu, the angel of annihilation Tia, an entire army of high elves, and a massive pack of inferno wolves. Gratz realizes that this completely explains how the village managed to defeat a wyvern so easily. Beezle admits that he thought his life was over when the killer angels guided him to the mayor, and he considers it a miracle that they were able to negotiate amicably. To make matters even crazier, Beezle presents the gifts he received. Gratz takes a bite of an apple and is amazed by the delicious taste, but Randan immediately panics and warns him that it might be poisoned. Beezle then examines the white cloth and realizes it was woven by a great demon spider, a legendary monster that once fought a previous demon lord to a standstill. Realizing that the village also controls a great demon spider, Randan completely loses his mind and immediately declares his resignation. A few days later, back at the Great Tree Village, another unexpected visitor arrives. A colossal blue dragon with a green mane lands right in front of the village, terrifying everyone. The dragon introduces himself as Drime, the true ruler of the dragons. Drime respectfully bows his head to Hiraku, and his assistant Gucci presents a highly expensive magical sword as a greeting gift. Gucci explains that Drime's lair is located to the south, and even though they live far away, they consider the villagers to be their neighbors and want to establish friendly relations. Hiraku accepts the gift but points out that Drime is far too large to fit inside any of the buildings. Gucci instructs Drime to take his smaller form, and the massive dragon instantly transforms into a human man with long dark hair and a mustache. Hiraku invites them inside the lodge and serves them a feast with the newly fermented wine. Drime instantly falls in love with the alcohol and gets completely drunk. He loudly declares that he is never going home and wants to live in the village permanently. Gucci quickly intervenes, reminding Drime that he has a responsibility to protect his own territory. Gucci drags the drunken dragon away before he can cause any more trouble, but they happily leave with a massive supply of apples as a parting gift. As Drime flies back to his mountain, Hiraku realizes that handling diplomatic relations is becoming incredibly complicated. Seeing how often they receive important guests, Hiraku calls a meeting with the elves to discuss how they should handle future visitors. He hates the idea of making guests wait outside the gates, but he is also uncomfortable inviting strangers directly into their private homes. He suggests building a dedicated guest house that can comfortably fit around 4 people. The elves immediately reject this idea, pointing out that anyone brave enough to cross the dangerous mountains and the forest of death will likely travel in large groups. They decide to build a massive 2-story lodge, capable of holding at least 30 people, featuring a large open space on the first floor for banquets and several bedrooms on the second floor. The elves quickly get to work and construct the new guest house. Next, Hiraku works on a proper reception protocol. Originally, the angels simply captured anyone approaching the village, or Zabaton would ring the warning bell, causing everyone to grab their weapons and prepare for battle. Hiraku realizes this is a terrible way to welcome people, so he tries to establish a small, friendly greeting party consisting of only himself, Lu, and Tia. The villagers completely reject his idea, arguing that enemies might try to sneak in disguised as friendly merchants. As a compromise, Hiraku forms a large, intimidating welcoming committee that includes high elves, ogre maids, and lizardmen. Flora also volunteers to keep watch over any guests during the night, utilizing her vampire ability to stay awake for days without sleep. All of these new preparations are put to the test when a group of beastmen from Howling Village arrives at the border. The leader, a purple-haired beastman named Garf, introduces himself and explains that they have traveled from the eastern mountains to establish trade relations. Tia steps forward to welcome them, but quickly notices that Garf only brought 3 companions with him. She sternly informs Garf that any troops they left hiding in the woods will be treated as hostile enemies. Garf begins sweating nervously, realizing that his scouts have already been discovered. Out in the forest, the hidden beastmen immediately surrender when Kuro's inferno wolves surround them. Tia warns Garf to make sure his entire group stays together and advises him to behave, subtly threatening him by mentioning that the village is filled with extremely dangerous individuals. Garf quickly agrees, and Tia escorts the United Beastmen group to the new guest house. As they walk inside, a long line of ogre maids bows respectfully, leaving the beastmen completely amazed by the incredible hospitality. Hiraku watches the beastmen settle in and feels proud that their new reception system is working perfectly. However, he soon notices the maids serving the beastmen a very meager meal consisting only of basic bread and raw vegetables. Hiraku asks the maids why they are not offering the guests any meat or wine. Tia explains that visitors who want to establish relations usually bring valuable offerings, pointing out the expensive sword Drime gifted them and the magical items from the demonic kingdom. Since the beastmen brought absolutely nothing, and even tried to hide troops in the woods, the village council decided to lower their hospitality level. Hiraku feels bad for the beastmen and forces the maids to serve them at least 2 cups of wine each. The beastmen enthusiastically drink the wine and enjoy the meal, completely unaware of the village's internal politics. Garf's companions praise him for keeping scouts in the woods, but they admit that they are glad they came out of hiding to enjoy the food. Later that evening, Hiraku sits down with Garf to formally discuss their trade agreement. Hiraku asks about Howling Village, and Garf explains that it is a collection of 5 small settlements mostly populated by beastmen who make a living through hunting and mining. They used to survive by trading with a human village across the mountains, but recent conflicts made that trade route completely unstable. Garf reveals that they learned about the Great Tree Village from one of the Demon Lord's subordinates and decided to seek a new partnership. Garf clarifies that Howling Village does not use currency, so they want to trade physical goods in an open market. Hiraku is relieved because his village also lacks currency. Garf apologizes for not bringing any gifts, explaining that his village is very poor, and he didn't even know gift-giving was a custom. Hiraku tells him not to worry about it, emphasizing that the thought behind a gift is more important than its value. Garf proposes trading their mined goods, such as glassworks, metalworks, and paints, in exchange for food. Hiraku eagerly agrees, excited to get his hands on manufactured items. Since traveling through the forest is difficult, Hiraku volunteers to have the Inferno Wolves carry the goods between the villages. A few days later, it is time for the first official trade mission to Howling Village. Hiraku wants to go, but Tia insists that sending the village mayor on the very first trip would make them look weak. Instead, Tia takes charge of the trade delegation, accompanied by the lizardmen. To speed up the journey, Drime agrees to fly them across the mountains in exchange for a barrel of wine. The massive dragon completely terrifies the residents of Howling Village when he lands, but the trade mission is a massive success. Tia returns to the Great Tree Village and reports that the beastmen initially refused to approach the unknown foods, but once she offered free samples, a massive crowd gathered and bought everything, even the wine meant for the Howling Village mayor. Tia also brings back unexpected news. The mayor of Howling Village requested permission to send some of their people to live in the Great Tree Village. Hiraku is thrilled to get more workers and immediately agrees. However, Tia mentions that all 20 of the immigrants are young women. Realizing that his village is severely lacking in men, Hiraku sets a strict condition, stating that he will only accept the women if Howling Village also sends at least 2 young men. Shortly after, the new residents arrive at the Great Tree Village. A beastkin girl with orange hair and red facial markings named Senna steps forward to represent the group. She bows deeply and nervously begs Hiraku not to abandon them, stating that they are mentally prepared to be used however he sees fit. Hiraku is slightly disturbed by her extreme mental preparation but warmly welcomes them and assures them they have nothing to worry about. He tells them to take their time getting acclimated to their new beds, and promises they can request their own houses later. Senna is overjoyed by his kindness and thanks him profusely. Hiraku then asks if the men he requested have arrived with them. Senna enthusiastically confirms that they brought exactly 3 males to join the village. She eagerly steps aside to present them, but Hiraku and the elves are completely stunned to see 3 tiny male children standing behind her. The elves calculate that they will have to wait at least 5 to 10 years before the boys actually become useful men. Realizing he has been technically outsmarted, Hiraku simply stares at the children and places the entire future of the village directly on their tiny shoulders. The beastmen from Howling Village start settling into their new home. Senna and the other girls sit in their cabin, completely terrified that they are going to be treated horribly by the villagers. Lemulia steps in as the housing manager and respectfully offers them her assistance. The girls quickly realize they have nothing to worry about. They take warm baths and eat delicious rice balls together. However, they keep fainting on a regular basis. Hiraku soon realizes they are passing out because they are not used to living alongside terrifying monsters like the demon spiders and the inferno wolves. He figures they will just have to get used to the environment. Later, Senna plays tag with the other kids in the village. During the game, she gets enveloped in a blue magical aura. Hiraku is completely surprised and asks if she can use magic. Senna confirms that she can. Hiraku quickly finds out that everyone in the village possesses magical abilities. The angels and high elves use it naturally for daily tasks. The maids and lizardmen use water magic to tend to the crop. Even Zabuton, the wolves, the bees, and the slimes can cast spells to put out fires or multiply. Hiraku realizes he is the only person in the entire village who cannot use magic. He feels a little left out and tries to practice with Senna, but absolutely nothing happens. He decides there is no point in wishing for the impossible and focuses his energy on farming instead. Suddenly, a massive earthquake shakes the entire forest. Tia flies down and urgently reports that a giant grappler bear and a bloody viper are fighting in the northern woods. She worries that the intense battle will damage the village. Hiraku calmly thinks about the animals and wonders if their meat tastes good. Tia is taken aback but agrees to take him there. She grabs Hiraku and flies high into the clear sky. They spot the massive brown bear and the giant horned serpent destroying the forest. The beasts roar and attack each other until they both collapse on the ground from exhaustion. Hiraku asks Tia to dive down quickly. He uses his farming tool and easily finishes off the giant monsters. The lizardmen drag the massive carcasses back to the village. The maids are completely shocked by the size of the beasts. Hiraku decides to cook them right away. He chops up the bear meat, throws it in a giant pot with herbs, and pours in a massive amount of precious red wine. The maids scream in horror at the wasted alcohol, but Hiraku ignores them. He tastes the stew and finds the bear meat incredibly gamey. Next, he slices the snake meat, coats it, and deep fries it. He serves the crispy snake to the girls. They absolutely love it, and happily claim it tastes just like fried chicken. However, Hiraku feels the dish is missing a specific condiment. He heads over to Flora's laboratory to get some supplies. He asks Flora for something that can kill harmful bacteria so he can safely make a new recipe. Flora gets overly excited and offers him a pink potion, claiming it can blast anything over the mountains. Hiraku refuses the explosive and asks for something safer. Flora then hands him a clear blue medicine that is perfectly safe for food. Hiraku thanks her and asks how her miso production is going. Flora complains that she followed his instructions, but the miso never ferments. She also admits that her attempts caused her hut to blow up 3 times. Hiraku agrees to help her try again. He gathers eggs, apple vinegar, salt, and oil. He quickly mixes them together in a bowl to create mayonnaise. He serves the creamy mayo with the fried snake meat. Flora tastes the combination and gets completely addicted. She tries to eat the mayonnaise straight from the bowl, but Hiraku strictly stops her because it is terrible for her health. Next, they move on to making the miso. They boil soybeans in a large pot and mash them in a mortar with a wooden pestle. Hiraku uses his farming tool and constantly chants the word moldy to create the koi. They form the mixture into small balls, pack them into barrels, and place heavy stones on top to let them age in the cellar. Flora realizes her miso failed because she never chanted the mold song. Just then, Lemulius announces that visitors have arrived. A group of elder dwarves led by a man named Donovan shows up at the village. Donovan explains that they traveled a long way because they heard about the high-quality alcohol. He admits they have absolutely no money but offers their advanced brewing technology in exchange for drinks. Hiraku eagerly accepts the deal. Donovan and his men immediately get to work. They process the village's corn and distill it in a large copper machine. They successfully produce a batch of crystal-clear corn whiskey. Hiraku takes a sip and is completely shocked by how incredibly strong it is. Donovan laughs at Hiraku for being a lightweight. The dwarves decide to stay in the village permanently to work as brewers. Hiraku throws a massive welcome party for the beastmen and the dwarves. Everyone drinks the new whiskey and eats the food with mayonnaise. A drunk dwarf gets out of hand and is quickly tied up by the others. Donovan pulls Hiraku aside and thanks him for taking them in. Hiraku points out all the beautiful girls in the village and asks if anyone caught Donovan's eye. Donovan seriously replies that the women are all too young and do not have beards. Hiraku quickly drops the subject, realizing the cultural differences are too huge. Later, Hiraku is working in the forest when a massive black dragon suddenly flies overhead. He spots another white dragon nearby and prepares to fight to protect the village. He shoots an orange magic beam from his tool, but the dragon dodges it. Suddenly, Gucci runs out of the woods and begs Hiraku to stop. He explains that the dragons are Dryme's wife Grafaloon and his daughter Lasti. Grafaloon transforms into her human form and acts incredibly angry. She accuses Dryme of sneaking out to have an affair. She explains that Dryme always takes treasure from their hoard and comes back the next morning smelling like wine. Gucci explains that Dryme was just bringing gifts to the village and drinking their alcohol. He even reveals that Dryme built a house near the village just to sleep off his hangovers. Grafaloon realizes she made a massive mistake. She and Lasti quickly bow and apologize to Hiraku for almost burning down the village. Hiraku also apologizes for attacking them without asking questions. Later, Grafaloon speaks privately with Gucci. She admits that the village is absolutely terrifying. She reveals that Hiraku's magic beam would have killed her instantly if Zabuton had not pulled her out of the way. She decides to leave Lasti in the village. She wants Lasti to act as a diplomat and ensure the village never turns its immense power against the dragons. Lasti introduces herself to Hiraku and happily agrees to stay and work. Hiraku tries to find a suitable job for Lasti around the village. She attempts to help with the harvest, but she accidentally crushes the tomatoes into juice and blows up the apples with a magic spell. She also tries washing the dishes but shatters all the plates on the floor. On top of that, all the animals in the village are completely terrified of her. The cows and chickens cower in fear from her dragon presence and completely stop producing milk and eggs. Hiraku realizes she is entirely unsuited for regular chores. He decides to make her the official diplomat instead. Soon, a human merchant arrives at the village to buy fruit. Lasti steps up to greet him. The merchant is absolutely terrified of standing in front of a legendary dragon. Lasti aggressively offers him strawberries. He stammers in fear and immediately agrees to buy 10 boxes. She then offers him apples, persimmons, and watermelons. The merchant cries in fear and agrees to buy everything just to get away from her. Lasti smiles cheerfully, thinking she is doing a great job at sales. Hiraku watches from a distance and figures she really got the hang of her new role. Meanwhile, in the Demon Lord's castle, the generals panic once again. They receive news that a legendary dragon just joined the village. They worry the village's military might is growing completely out of control. Beazle suggests sending a spy to monitor the situation. He volunteers his own daughter, Florem, for the mission. He warns her to be careful and to prioritize her safety above everything else. Florem is very confident in her magic skills and promises to do a good job. She flies to the village and looks down from the sky. She thinks it looks like an ordinary farming town but wonders how it survives surrounded by dangerous monsters. She lands at the gate and is immediately greeted by Lasti. Florem is absolutely shocked to see the terrifying dragon acting as a simple greeter. Lasti casually brags about the local grapes they grow. Florem cannot believe a legendary dragon is showing off crops. Suddenly, Tia flies down to report a messenger. Lasti excuses herself to handle the situation. Florem takes the opportunity to sneak around the village and analyze their military strength. She hides behind trees and closely observes the residents. She spots the lizardmen, the beastmen, the ogres, and the dwarves working together. Then she sees Lou making potions and Tia hanging out with the killer angels. She knows they are famous and incredibly dangerous warriors. She also sees the high elves and mistakenly believes they are terrifying man-eaters who kidnap young men. Floram then notices a massive pack of inferno wolves and demon spiders working in complete harmony. She completely loses all her confidence and feels entirely outmatched by the village's power. While wandering around the forest, she bumps into Hiraku carrying a large hammer. He casually asks what she is doing. Floram gets extremely defensive and acts incredibly rude to him. She claims she does not need any help from a weak, ordinary human. Hiraku is just confused by her attitude and walks away. Later, Floram talks to Lasti and asks about the human she met. Lasti casually mentions that the human is the mayor of the village and he is strong enough to easily defeat her mother. Floram realizes she just insulted the most dangerous person in the entire area. She completely panics and her face turns pale. From that day on, Floram stays in the village and acts extremely nervous and polite whenever Hiraku is around. Tia brings a blue slime to the village to help purify the wastewater, but the creature quickly starts to multiply, creating various slimes of different colors. The slimes are mostly harmless until a red one accidentally drinks an entire barrel of the village's precious alcohol. The alcohol-loving residents, especially the elves and the dragons, are absolutely furious about the theft and demand a severe punishment. They suggest burning the slime, drying it out in the sun, or locking it up in confinement to teach it a lesson. Hiraku steps in to calm everyone down, pointing out that it is just a simple slime and probably does not understand what it did wrong. He decides to officially acquit the creature, and from then on, the slime casually joins their feasts and celebrations without any more issues. Autumn eventually arrives, bringing cooler weather and a bountiful harvest for the village. Hiraku takes advantage of the fresh crops and cooks a massive, hearty hot pot filled with mushrooms and vegetables for everyone. The villagers love the meal, but Hiraku casually mentions that it would taste even better if they had seafood like cod, crabs, or kombu for the broth. The girls are completely confused since they have never seen or heard of the ocean, but once Hiraku explains what seafood is, they immediately want to try it. Floram mentions that there is a port city called Shashato within the demonic kingdom where they can easily find marine products. Hearing this, Floram and Lasti immediately volunteer to fly there to get the ingredients, leaving Hiraku amused by how motivated everyone gets when food is involved. 3 days later, the head of the Garoun company, Michael Garoun, arrives at the village to personally deliver the requested goods. He presents a large stock of fresh fish and promises that his fishermen are already gathering the kombu seaweed, which they normally just throw away. Michael then explains that he has 3 main goals for his visit. First, he wants to properly greet Hiraku. Second, he hopes to expand their trade opportunities. Third, he formally requests to become the village's official government purveyor so he can handle all of their external trade. Michael explains that many outsiders desperately want to trade with the village, and having him manage the negotiations will maximize their profits while filtering out any potential risks. Hiraku agrees to the deal, but after the successful negotiation, Michael gets completely terrified when Drime offers to give him a ride back home on his dragon back. A flashback to 3 days prior reveals exactly how Michael got involved in this crazy situation. He is extremely busy working in his study in Shashato City when his assistant tells him that some unannounced visitors have arrived and are requesting him by name. Michael initially wants to turn them away, but his merchant intuition tells him he needs to take the meeting. He is absolutely shocked to find Floram, the daughter of the powerful Chrome family, waiting for him alongside Lasti, a legendary and highly dangerous dragon. Michael is terrified of the massive risks associated with dealing with a dragon and a noble, but then they uncover baskets full of the village's high-quality apples. The fruit is incredibly rare and valuable in the demonic kingdom, and seeing the massive profit potential instantly makes Michael's greed outweigh his fear. He immediately orders his men to gather the best seafood in the port and decides to personally deliver the goods to the Forest of Death to secure the trade route. Lasti offers him a ride, and Michael deeply regrets his decision as he screams in terror while flying on the giant dragon's back. When he finally arrives at the Great Tree Village, his fear skyrockets even further upon seeing illegal demons, killer angels, inferno wolves, and vampires casually living together. Despite nearly dying of fright, he survives the meeting and officially secures the best and most profitable deal of his entire life. Back in the present, Hiraku cooks a delicious seafood hot pot using the ingredients Michael brought. Everyone is completely amazed by the incredible new flavors, and Hiraku is thrilled to finally eat real seafood, planning to ask the merchant for shrimp and squid next time. Shortly after the feast, a massive white dragon suddenly appears in the sky above the village. The Angel Patrol Squad tries to intercept the intruder, but the dragon easily swats them away and starts causing massive magical explosions in the forest. Hiraku assumes the dragon is here for a fight, so he creates a sturdy wooden spear with his farming tool and throws it into the sky with immense force. The spear hits the dragon right in the head, causing her to plummet from the sky and crash into the trees. Hiraku goes to check the wreckage and finds himself surrounded by his loyal wolves. A white-haired girl emerges from the dust and quickly surrenders to him. Drime quickly runs over and nervously introduces the girl as his older sister, Hakurin. Hakurin angrily explains that she only came to attack the village to vent her frustration because Drime drunkenly promised to marry Lasty off to Hiraku. Hakurin is furious that her young niece is getting a husband while she, who is 900 years older, is still entirely single. Hiraku is annoyed by her ridiculous reason for burning his forest and strictly forces her to clean up the mess she made. Hakurin decides to stay in the village for a while and quickly fits in with the others. During a feast, she asks about the local games, so Hiraku introduces her to Mahjong. Hakurin, Lasty, Drime, and Hiraku sit down for a serious game. Hakurin suggests they bet something to make it interesting, and since Hiraku does not really own anything valuable, she proposes they play strip Mahjong. Hiraku nervously agrees, thinking he can just play it safe and avoid losing too badly. However, he quickly learns that dragons are incredibly competitive and absolutely hate losing. They aggressively dominate the game, and Hiraku starts to suspect they are using magic telekinesis to cheat or rewrite the tiles. He realizes they are just naturally lucky, and he ends up losing constantly until he is down to his last piece of clothing. He finally gets a great hand and prepares to win the whole game with a massive double Yakuman. He confidently makes his move, but Lasty suddenly steals the win right at the last second. The girls cheer enthusiastically and force Hiraku to strip, leaving him completely defeated and humiliated under the starry sky. Meanwhile, at the Demon Lord's castle, the generals receive terrifying reports that the ancient dragon Hakurin has also moved into the Great Tree Village. Beazle and the others realize the village now possesses enough raw military power to easily conquer their entire country. Demon Lord Galgardo ignores the threat because he is too distracted by his daughter ignoring him during her rebellious phase. The generals are left to handle the panic alone, and Randon is so overwhelmed by the stress of the situation that he simply leaves a resignation letter on his desk and completely runs away from the castle. Back in the village, Hakurin turns out to be incredibly lazy and avoids doing any real work. She complains about every single chore Hiraku gives her and completely gives up on digging holes after just one day. Hiraku eventually assigns her to be the village teacher for the Beastmen children. She teaches them reading, writing, and math, with the sole motivation that if the kids get smart and handle all the village's future work, she will never have to lift a finger again. One day, 3 topless Lamia girls arrive at the village begging for their lives. Hiraku is completely confused until he learns that Kuro's wolf pups recently cleared a dungeon in the forest just for fun. The pups inadvertently destroyed the Lamia's home during their playtime, forcing the snake women to flee. Feeling responsible for his pet's actions, Hiraku immediately offers the Lamias protection and agrees to trade the village's crops for the magical blue crystals they mine. The Lamias are overjoyed by the generous deal and set up a dedicated delivery service to transport the village's trading goods. However, Hiraku awkwardly pulls them aside and asks them to wear some clothes when visiting because their topless culture is making it really hard for him to not stare at them. The Lamias agree to cover up, and the village's trade network continues to expand smoothly and safely. Elsewhere, Demon Lord Galgardo's daughter, Princess Yuri, holds a secret meeting with her subordinates in a castle tower. She reviews the recent intelligence reports and sees that the village is rapidly amassing a terrifying military force. She immediately jumps to the conclusion that the village is planning a foul attack on the Demon Kingdom and is actively holding Florim hostage to use her as a bargaining chip. Determined to save Florim and protect her country from the perceived threat, Yuri firmly orders her troops to gather immediately so they can launch a full-scale assault on the Great Tree Village. Florim learns that Princess Yuri is actually gathering troops and preparing to go on a military campaign against the Great Tree Village. Beazle explains that while Florim was away, some of Yuri's followers took the opportunity to fill her head with half-truths. Florim recognizes the followers as Rosalind, Klakas, and Rawaju, the politically powerful but foolish daughters of various noble families. She complains that she has already sent plenty of reports detailing the village's ridiculous power, but Beazle points out that the reports were so unbelievable that the nobles simply assumed they were fake. Beazle adds that he tried to have Demon Lord Galgardo put a stop to the invasion, but the Demon Lord is far too soft on his daughter to intervene. Florim offers to go convince the nobles to stop, but Beazle warns her that doing so would cause them to view her as an enemy of the demonic kingdom. He then drops the shocking news that the invasion force of 300 men is mobilizing tomorrow. Florim realizes she needs to stop the invasion by showing them the massive difference in military might, but she has to do it without officially mobilizing the village's forces. Otherwise, the resulting conflict will likely end with the violent destruction of the entire demonic kingdom. Florim recruits a few of the powerful girls from the village and intercepts the invading army in the forest. The girls unleash a massive, devastating magic beam that instantly obliterates the surrounding trees. The terrifying display of sheer power completely breaks the invading knights, and they immediately drop their weapons and beg for their lives. Florim casually asks if they are done while the three noble girls stand completely frozen in shock. Florim brings the three terrified nobles back to the village and tells Hiraku that they are from the demonic kingdom and have had a sudden change of heart, making them willing to work themselves to death for the village. Hiraku notes that they look pale and seem like they have completely given up on life, but Florim assures him they will be fine. She then casually tells Hiraku that if the nobles do anything to harm the village, he should not hesitate to dispose of them. The brutal threat completely paralyzes the three girls with fear. Florim also introduces Princess Yuri, claiming she is just an acquaintance who came to observe the living conditions. She tells Hiraku not to give Yuri any special royal treatment and to put her to work with the understanding that she will leave soon. Hiraku agrees and puts Florim in charge of showing them around. Florim then pulls the noble girls aside and sternly warns them that their transgressions will only be forgiven if they put in honest work. She also advises them to keep their royal identities a secret from the rest of the villagers to avoid causing a panic. Yuri happily agrees to just go by her first name, noting that it has been a long time since anyone simply called her Yuri. The group begins their tour of the village, and Yuri is amazed by the massive agricultural operation. She learns how the grapes are turned into alcohol, marvels at the lotus plants growing in the flooded fields, and is shocked to see a fully functional water wheel powering the workshop without the use of magic. Yuri also quickly bonds with the local beastkin children, happily rubbing their fluffy ears while the kids giggle. The group then visits the apple orchard, where the elves offer them freshly picked fruit. Yuri mentions that she has only ever eaten apples at fancy castle parties, because merchants usually buy up the entire supply, making them incredibly rare back home. Hearing this, the three noble girls quietly scheme among themselves, whispering that if they can take over the village, it will become the biggest money-maker for their kingdom. Florim overhears their plotting and aggressively glares at them, threatening to dispose of them on the spot. The nobles immediately panic and drop the subject. The group is then greeted by Lasti, who cheerfully introduces herself as a dragon. The noble girls retreat to a wooden lodge and furiously complain about being forced to live in the middle of nowhere. They agree to wait for a chance to escape, fearing they will become the laughingstock of their country if they stay. However, their escape plan is immediately ruined that night when they encounter the village's massive inferno wolves and the giant magic-wielding spider Zabaton roaming the forest. The sheer terror of the monsters completely breaks their spirits. The next day, the three girls eagerly pledge their absolute loyalty to the village and promise to work like their lives depend on it. Florim happily puts them to work doing her massive pile of paperwork, officially dubbing them the Town Hall Girls. Meanwhile, Yuri continues to adapt to village life and even plays fetch with one of the Inferno wolves. She watches the deadly beast act like a harmless pet and tells Florim that the village is full of surprises. Yuri admits her ignorance and sincerely apologizes for trying to bring war to such a peaceful place, realizing that anyone who attacks the village would just end up getting incinerated by dragonfire. She confesses that she genuinely thought the intelligence reports about dragons living in the village were just lies meant to deceive her. Florim points out that the Demon Lord should have warned her against the attack, but Yuri snaps back and blames Florim for the entire misunderstanding. Yuri yells that they have been friends since childhood, but Florim suddenly vanished one day and stopped communicating with her. Yuri adds that when Florim finally did reach out, she treated Yuri like a complete stranger by calling her princess instead of a friend. Florem realizes how much she hurt her and places her hands on Yuri's shoulders, warmly apologizing for shutting her out and promising to keep her in the loop from now on. Yuri accepts the apology, and the two friends happily reconcile. As autumn arrives, Yuri fully integrates into the village workforce. She enthusiastically joins the beastkin and the elves in the fields, digging up root vegetables, harvesting wheat and picking apples. When the time comes for Yuri to finally return to the demonic kingdom, the villagers gather to see her off and present her with a large basket of freshly baked bread made from the wheat she helped harvest. Yuri thanks everyone for their kindness and asks the three noble girls if they are coming home with her. However, the town hall girls fiercely refuse to leave. They claim they still have much to learn and need to repay the village's kindness, but in reality, they are completely addicted to the incredible food and the relaxing baths, preferring the peaceful village life over their stressful political duties back home. Yuri says her goodbyes and teleports away. Back at the Demon Lord's castle, Galgardo complains to Beezle that Yuri has been acting completely different since she returned. He whines that she has suddenly become very dignified and busy, completely ignoring him whenever he tries to talk to her. Beezle suggests that she is just maturing and taking an interest in politics, but Galgardo jumps to the conclusion that she must have met a man. The Demon Lord erupts in a massive pillar of dark magic, furiously vowing to tear the mysterious boyfriend apart. Beezle quickly calms him down and warns him that acting like a lunatic will only make Yuri hate him, advising the Demon Lord to act like a cool father instead. Meanwhile, the Great Tree Village finishes its pre-winter harvest, and the crop yield is so massive that it completely overflows their storage buildings. Hiraku decides to share the excess food with Lasti's father, Dorium. The group also mentions sending some to her grandparents, the Emperor Dragon Doze and the Hurricane Dragon Raymalin, which surprises Hiraku since he never realized the dragons had such an extensive family network. Lasti and Hakurin volunteer to fly out and make the deliveries. Lasti stops by the port city to drop off the crops to the merchant Michael Goroon. Michael asks Lasti for a favor, requesting that she exterminate a sea monster that has been attacking his trade vessels. Lasti happily agrees and effortlessly obliterates the monster with a massive magical strike from the sky. She returns to the village with the monster's meat, which turns out to be a rare delicacy called chanko. Hiraku uses the meat to cook a massive seafood hot pot for the entire village. Around the same time, Hakurin returns from her delivery up north and brings back a group of dark-skinned mountain elves led by a woman named Ya. Ya explains that her people usually live in the mountains, but they have been struggling to find food lately, and ask if they can move into the village. Hiraku happily accepts them and promises to help them build houses. The mountain elves immediately try to prove their worth by offering to hunt for the village, but they end up clumsily triggering their own traps and getting launched into the air by rabbits and wild boars. Feeling useless, Ya decides to use her knowledge of the earth to make pottery for the village. However, the local soil crumbles and breaks apart in the kiln. Determined to succeed, Ya ventures out into the forest to find proper clay and eventually returns with high-quality earth. She successfully crafts several beautiful bowls and jars, much to Hiraku's delight. During their explorations, the elves also discover a brand new dungeon up north near the mountains. Hiraku approves a request to send a survey team consisting of wolves, lizardmen, and elves to investigate the area. While the team is away, the village finally finishes constructing the new men's bathhouse. Hiraku happily takes a soak, relieved that the dwarves, lizardmen, and visiting dragons finally have their own space. However, 3 female attendants try to sneak into the men's bath to wash Hiraku's back, hoping to use the opportunity to get closer to him and climb the social ladder. Florem catches them in the hallway and severely scolds them. She flashes a terrifying smile and warns them that trying to sneak their way to the top of the village hierarchy will result in them being permanently disposed of, forcing the terrified girls to back down. Shortly after, the survey team returns from the northern dungeon and reports that they found a blood viper inside. The elf girls become incredibly intense and demand that they send an extermination party immediately to harvest its meat. Ya explains to a confused Hiraku that blood viper meat is extremely valuable because it makes the body overflow with vitality, improves husband and wife relations, and heavily increases the chances of having children. Ya gets incredibly flustered and embarrassed while explaining the fertility benefits, and the other elf girls declare that the survival of their entire clan depends on getting that meat. Hiraku is completely overwhelmed by their aggressive enthusiasm and nervously suggests they delay the hunt and discuss it with the rest of the village since winter is already approaching. As the cold weather sets in, Lucy suddenly falls ill and becomes bedridden. Hiraku rushes to her cabin to check on her, feeling anxious because he has never had to make medicine for her before. Lu assures him that it is nothing serious, explaining that she just has a slight fever and some nausea. She mentions that she has completely lost her appetite for normal food but finds herself constantly craving sour things like tomatoes. Floram listens to the symptoms and realizes exactly what is going on. She points out that a woman in the nearby Howling village had the exact same symptoms recently, and the villagers ended up congratulating her on having a baby. Hiraku is completely stunned as he finally connects the dots and realizes that Lu is pregnant. Once the news of Lu's pregnancy spreads, the entire village erupts into a massive uproar of joy and celebration. The following morning, Hiraku checks on Lu in her room to make sure she is feeling alright. She tells him not to worry so much and assures him that everything will be fine. Hiraku then begins his usual morning routine, explaining that he intentionally wakes up a bit later than everyone else. This way, the maids can wake up early and get their tasks done without feeling rushed or pressured by his presence. As he makes his rounds, he checks in with Flora to see if she has any reports. He quickly notices that she looks completely exhausted, with heavy dark circles under her eyes. Flora begins muttering about microorganisms and admits she has not slept at all because she is struggling to make progress on the village's miso production. Hiraku gently implores her to take a break and get some rest. Afterward, it is time for breakfast. Because the village population has grown so much, they have to split the morning meal into 3 separate groups. The first group features a hearty meal of daikon radish soup, spinach, and smoked killer rabbit. Hiraku eats with Lu and Flora, enjoying the food prepared by the maids. The second breakfast group consists of the maids themselves, who eat right after finishing their serving duties. The third group is reserved for anyone who oversleeps, which usually includes Hakurin. Later, Gran Maria approaches Hiraku to deliver a security report. She explains that a group of 3 killer rabbits tried to infiltrate the village yesterday, but Kuro and the other wolves easily eliminated them. Hiraku notes that the rabbits never learn their lesson, but he is thankful for the free meat they provide. He also realizes that while Gran Maria and the other angels are incredibly strict and composed while on patrol, they turn completely lazy the moment they go off duty. They rely entirely on the maids to cook for them and make the lizardmen do all their laundry. Still, Hiraku is happy to have them around because they work incredibly hard to keep the village safe. After checking on Kuro and Zabuton's children, Hiraku heads out to the fields to do his farm work. He channels his magical energy through his almighty farming tool to water the crops. He uses the tool to eliminate strange little black spirits that act as garden pests in this world, since normal insects do not seem to bother the plants. The farm has expanded massively, and Hiraku feels a deep sense of satisfaction as he looks at all the fully matured eggplants, green beans, and gourds. When lunchtime arrives, Hiraku sits under a massive tree and eats rice balls with the villagers. He notes that eating lunch is actually a very rare concept in this world. The High Elves, in particular, used to starve in the forest and were initially terrified of eating 3 meals a day. They feared they would eat through the village's entire food supply and get kicked out. Hiraku promises to make sure that no one ever has to worry about food as long as they live under his care. During the meal, Daga approaches and asks to increase the allotted feed because the cows just gave birth to new calves. Right after, one of the elves warns Hiraku that their crop storage room is about to overflow completely. Hiraku tells her that they will consult with Floram about selling the excess produce to Michael. After lunch, Hiraku gets back to work. Since the others handle most of the regular farming, he focuses on tilling new fields and planting new things. He decides to add some color to the village by using his magic tool to instantly grow a beautiful bed of yellow tulips and white narcissus. He also spends his time fulfilling random requests from the villagers, using his tools to carve small wooden blocks for the beastkin children to play with. Later in the afternoon, Hiraku joins the village's combat training session. He swings a wooden sword alongside the lizardmen and the maids. The maids complain that if they keep eating the amazing village food, they will soon grow out of their sacred uniforms, which motivates them to train even harder. Hiraku quickly reaches his physical limit and leans against a wooden dummy, exhausted. Ya, the dark-skinned mountain elf, shows off her skills by instantly throwing several knives into the dummy's head. Hiraku thinks throwing weapons might suit him better, but when he tries to throw a knife, it comically bounces off the dummy and flies into the air. Realizing he is terrible with normal weapons, he decides to try his black-tipped spear. He throws it at the dummy, and the weapon unleashes a massive, blinding explosion of pink and blue magical energy that completely obliterates the target. The elves are absolutely stunned by the raw power, but Hiraku nervously admits he has no idea when he would ever need to use something that destructive. As the sun sets, Hiraku heads back to the main lodge for dinner. The dining hall is packed with people, and Anne serves a brand new dish of simmered killer rabbit with a sweet honey sauce. Hiraku takes a bite and finds it incredibly sweet, noting that Anne only had a 20% confidence level in the recipe. He politely asks her to only serve dishes she is mostly confident in, but Anne strictly refuses, stating that they cannot afford to waste any food. Hiraku accepts his fate and forces himself to enjoy the meal. During dinner, one of the maids delivers a letter from Princess Yuri. The princess writes that she wants to eat more of their apples and requests another dress. Hiraku sighs, feeling bad about Yuri's constant demands, but Florim assures him that Zabuton actually loves making clothes for her. After dinner, Hiraku heads to the newly built men's bathhouse. He soaks in the hot spring all by himself, extremely grateful that he forced the village to build a separate bath for the men so he can finally relax in peace while the girls play in their own bath. However, his relaxation ends the moment he steps into his bedroom. He immediately senses people watching him from the shadows. Terrified, he calls out for help, and suddenly 4 elf girls pop out of hidden trapdoors in the floor, walls, and ceiling. Realizing their cover is blown, the elves quickly retreat back into the hidden compartments. Hiraku tries to convince himself that they are just keeping watch to protect him, but he immediately vows to seal up all those hidden doors the next morning. The following day, Hiraku visits the village's stone brewery. Inside, Donovan and the dwarves are surrounded by billowing white steam as they work the distiller. Hiraku realizes that despite their reputation as heavy drinkers, the dwarves take their brewing incredibly seriously. Donovan refuses to let anyone drink on the job, warning that a drunk worker managing the furnace could easily start a fire. Donovan inspects a new batch of clear sake, but his face darkens with disappointment. He declares the booze a complete failure because it only burns the throat and lacks any real flavor. He marks the glass bottle with a large black cross, but instead of throwing it away, he explains that they will distill it further and mix it with fruit juice to salvage it. Donovan then turns to Hiraku and aggressively requests that he triple the amount of grapes they harvest. Hiraku agrees but feels a bit overwhelmed by the massive quota. Suddenly, Senna runs up to Hiraku in a complete panic. She warns him that a strange man managed to sneak past Gran Maria's patrols and Zabuton's webs without anyone noticing. Hiraku rushes to the village shrine and finds a brown-haired man in a red coat prostrating himself on the dirt floor in front of the wooden statues. Lou and Flora arrive and casually call the man Lulusi, but then correct themselves and address him as the progenitor. Hiraku learns that this man is Vargrafe, the progenitor of the vampires and essentially Lou and Flora's grandfather. Vargrafe explains that he is over 4,000 years old, but he keeps his youthful appearance and sanity by using magic to periodically erase his own memories, only keeping the most important details about his name and clan. Vargrafe apologizes for entering the village unannounced. He explains that he only intended to look around, but he was completely captivated by the wooden statue of God that Hiraku carved. Vargrafe reveals that he actually met the creator when he was born. God told him to do his best in life, even though he would be born with an abnormal vampire body. Vargrafe complains that he could never remember God's exact appearance, so he could never carve a proper statue himself. He begs to take the village's statue, but Hiraku refuses to give away their main idol. Seeing Vargrafe's crushing disappointment, Hiraku offers to carve a brand new statue just for him. Vargrafe instantly lights up with joy and eagerly accepts. Hiraku gets to work, and Vargrafe happily prostrates before the newly finished carving. He asks how much he owes for the artwork, but Hiraku strictly refuses to take any money for an idol of God. Vargrafe promises to find another way to repay him. He wishes Lou a healthy pregnancy and happily leaves the village carrying the massive statue wrapped in white cloth on his back. Vargrafe immediately travels back to his grand sunlit cathedral in the human realm. He greets the elderly head priest, noting that they have not seen each other in 50 years. Vargrafe shows the priest the new statue and orders him to enshrine it in the best possible spot. The priest is shocked, pointing out that they would have to remove their most famous and beloved masterpiece, crafted by a legendary sculptor. Vargrafe dismisses the concern and orders him to do it anyway. He also commands the priest to send a message to all the other temples across the land, demanding that they show absolute respect to the Great Tree Village and quietly support Hiraku without disturbing his peaceful life. Back at the village, Hiraku suddenly sneezes, feeling a strange chill. A few days later, a massive delivery arrives from the progenitor. As a gift to celebrate Lu's pregnancy, Vargreif sends the village an incredibly ornate black and gold grand piano. Hiraku and the lizardmen move the massive instrument into the dining hall. The younger girls stare at the piano with wide eyes, completely mesmerized. However, they quickly realize that it is the kind of priceless artifact only found in massive temples. Panic sets in and the girls begin sweating and crying, terrified that if they accidentally break it, it will cost them their lives. Seeing their exaggerated despair, Hiraku immediately contacts Michael and asks him to procure a cheap, beat-up practice piano. Once the plain wooden piano arrives, the girls finally calm down. Soon, everyone in the village takes turns practicing and playing music, filling the halls with joyful melodies. However, the excitement causes them to practice endlessly. That night, Hiraku lies in his bed, clutching his blanket and sweating nervously, as the loud piano music continues echoing through the dark village, desperately wishing they would just stop playing so he can finally get some sleep. Spring rolls in, and the sun starts shining much brighter, making all the crops in the village grow perfectly. Hiraku takes a quick break from pruning the tomato plants and sits down to have lunch with the girls. Lu uses her magic to drop some ice cubes into their drinks, which instantly revitalizes Hiraku. He tells Lu that she really needs to be careful and not push herself too hard, but she insists that she feels fine. She mentions that the village girls have been teaching her that getting some light exercise is actually really good for keeping her body strong during the pregnancy. Everyone is incredibly supportive and constantly checks in on her. They bring up how heavy her belly must feel, comparing it to carrying 2 large cabbages around all day. Lu admits her appetite is fully back, but there is one major thing bothering her. She complains that she completely misses drinking alcohol. Later on, a group of the female knights approaches Hiraku with a desperate plea. They beg him to sell off all the alcohol in the village immediately. They explain that they all made a pact to stop drinking out of solidarity with Lu until she gives birth. However, whenever they eat a good meal, the craving for a cold drink becomes outright unbearable, so they want him to remove the temptation entirely. Hiraku refuses their request, telling them that they will severely regret it later. He explains that sake actually improves and tastes much better the longer it is allowed to age in the barrels. He encourages them to just tough it out a little longer so they can enjoy the superior booze later. Meanwhile, Donovan and his fellow dwarf brewers sit outside on a log, looking completely depressed. They ask Hiraku if they did something wrong, because no one in the village is touching a single drop of their alcohol anymore. They assume everyone suddenly hates the taste of their brew. Hiraku realizes the massive misunderstanding and quickly explains that the girls are just holding off on drinking in solidarity with Lu. Donovan is instantly relieved and promises to brew even more to live up to everyone's expectations when the ban is finally lifted. Back in their cabin, Lu spends her time indoors to avoid the intense heat. Her friends constantly drop by to check on her and bring her various gifts. Tia brings a rare white flower that actually releases cold air to keep the room perfectly chilled. Ya drops off a jar of secret mountain elf medicine meant to bring good health. A horned girl gifts her a magical blue gem necklace taken from her father's treasure room to help with magic recovery. Anne the maid presents a freshly made custard pudding, while another girl gives her a woven floral wreath for good luck. Flora even brings her a bowl of tomato and tofu miso soup, which turns out to be surprisingly delicious. Daga the lizardman feels entirely useless since his kind lays eggs and he knows nothing about pregnancy, so he wildly offers his own blood to make Lu stronger. She politely declines, noting that her teeth could never pierce his thick scales. That evening, Hiraku and Lu relax together, and she shows him a small wooden mallet tied with a white ribbon. She explains that Donovan gave it to her, claiming it would come in handy later. Hiraku is completely confused about why a wooden mallet would be needed for childbirth. Suddenly, Lu clutches her stomach as the labor pains begin. The maids instantly spring into action, running around the lodge with stacks of clean towels and boiling water over the hearths. Hiraku is totally useless in this situation, so he simply waits nervously outside the room. Unable to stand the anxiety, he steps out of the lodge and walks over to the cavern entrance, gazing out at the vast forest under the twin moons. He reflects on his journey, remembering how he originally wanted to live completely alone away from other people. Now he is surrounded by a massive family and friends. He waits through the night until morning finally breaks. The fox-eared girl and a lavender-haired elf come out of the room and happily announce that the delivery was a total success, and both mother and child are doing perfectly well. Hiraku rushes inside and finds Lu sitting on the bed, tenderly cradling a newborn baby wrapped in a white cloth. She invites Hiraku to hold him. Hiraku nervously takes the baby, making sure to carefully support his neck just like the girls instruct him to. He is surprised by how warm and heavy the tiny infant feels. The baby suddenly smiles at him and Hiraku realizes he is truly a father now. He thinks back to his previous life where he suffered endlessly from a horrible illness. He silently vows to make sure his son grows up incredibly strong so he never has to experience that kind of pain. Lu agrees, promising that they will raise him to be strong together. A week later, the village is fully back to normal. Hiraku officially names his son Alfred. Even though Lu is a vampire, the baby currently looks just like a normal human boy. Hiraku stands in his massive farm and looks at the sprawling village, amazed at how much it has grown from a single tiny plot of land to a bustling settlement with multiple large buildings. Since everyone has worked so hard to build up the village, Hiraku decides it is time to reward them. He calls a meeting with the girls and introduces a brand new system for the village. He pulls out a small silver coin engraved with a tree emblem and calls it a reward medal. He explains that as the village's population continues to explode, it is becoming impossible for him to personally manage and distribute every single piece of meat, crop, and resource. He wants to transition the village to a proper economy using currency. Since introducing money all at once might cause chaos, he plans to slowly integrate these medals as vouchers that the villagers can exchange for goods. To get things started, he gives every villager 3 medals while handing out 30 medals each to the massive wolf and spider families. The villagers react to the new currency in wildly different ways. Some immediately rush to the tavern to trade their medals for wine. Others use them to purchase weapons that Dream previously brought as gifts. A few villagers just keep the shiny coins in their rooms as decorations, which Hiraku hopes they eventually spend. The new system quickly causes a massive surge in demand for custom-made furniture and toys. Hiraku finds himself working harder than ever, frantically chopping wood and using his tools to craft miniature stools and wooden discs to fulfill all the orders. One of the Beastkin girls even runs up to him in tears, slamming her 3 medals on the table and begging to buy a baby from him. Hiraku instantly shuts that down, explaining that babies are definitely not for sale. Instead, they compromise, and she uses her medals to rent Hiraku for a full day of playing together with the other kids. Eventually, it is time for the massive feast to celebrate Alfred's birth. The entire village gathers around a giant glowing bonfire outside the main lodge, raising their wooden mugs and cheering in celebration. Lu feels a little guilty for making everyone wait so long for the party, but Hiraku assures her that everyone is having an amazing time. Donovan steps up and announces that he and his team brewed a completely brand new type of wine specifically for this occasion. He points to a massive wooden barrel and tells Lu that it is finally time to use the gift he gave her. Realizing what he meant, Lu grabs the wooden mallet with the white ribbon. She and Hiraku strike the lid of the barrel together, cracking it open and sending a splash of wine into the air. The crowd erupts into cheers and immediately starts drinking. Hiraku points out that doing a big ceremonial barrel smash makes any celebration way better. Donovan asks Lu what she thinks of the wine, but she has to painfully admit that she still cannot drink anything because she is currently breastfeeding Alfred. Donovan completely understands her situation and comes up with a brilliant idea. He suggests that before the greedy villagers drink the entire barrel, they should bottle up a portion of the special wine and hide it away to age. That way, they can keep it safe until Alfred is finally old enough to drink it with them. Hiraku and Lu absolutely love the idea and tell Donovan to secure the wine immediately before the crowd finishes it. As they enjoy the party, Hiraku and Lu notice Flora obsessing over baby Alfred. She joyfully plays with him and wildly declares that Alfred wants to be her baby instead, prompting the others to quickly tell her to calm down. Meanwhile, news of the Great Tree Village's continued prosperity reaches the distant demonic kingdom. The Demon Lord's generals hold a serious meeting in their grand castle. They discuss the birth of the new child and officially conclude that trying to challenge or fight Hiraku's village is completely impossible. A silver-armored knight suggests that they need to focus purely on maintaining an amicable relationship with them. Another official aggressively proposes that they should secure an alliance by marrying off Princess Yuri to someone in the village. The Demon Lord instantly erupts in a total panic, screaming that he will never hand his daughter over to anyone no matter what happens. At the same time, in a human town, a wealthy noble prepares a massive shipment of goods and gifts. He orders his subordinates to make sure everything is absolutely perfect so they can send a proper congratulatory present to the village and stay on Hiraku's good side. Back in the Great Tree Village, the peaceful days continue until Florim and Grandmaria approach Hiraku with a serious request. They explain that a recent war with a neighboring kingdom has completely displaced a large number of refugees from their forest homes. Drime and Florim's father both sent word that these people desperately need a safe place to stay. Hiraku asks exactly how many refugees they are talking about, and Florim nervously admits that the number has easily broken past the 3-digit mark. Hiraku realizes that taking in over 100 new people would completely overwhelm their current infrastructure. However, he refuses to turn them away. He declares that if they are going to accept that many people, they simply need to build an entirely new settlement. He announces his plan to construct Great Tree Village 2 to house all the incoming refugees. The female adventurers instantly cheer in overwhelming support. They remind everyone that Hiraku's village saved them when they were in trouble, so they absolutely cannot abandon people in need. Hiraku tells them to gather everyone for a planning meeting so they can figure out exactly where to build the new village and begin preparing the necessary supplies immediately. The villagers realize that a massive number of immigrants are coming, so everyone immediately pitches in to gather food and prepare the settlement. To prioritize preserving food for the long term, Anne the headmaid focuses on cooking ingredients that spoil quickly, resulting in a daily menu heavily featuring fresh vegetables. She prepares large batches of vegetable pita sandwiches, packed with tomatoes and cucumbers for the workers to easily eat on the job. Hiraku takes a basket of these fresh sandwiches to the village office, where the civil servant girls are completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of administrative work. Rosalind, Roaju, and Klakase are practically buried behind towering mountains of yellowed parchment and scrolls, struggling to keep track of all the incoming food and housing supplies. They are so mentally exhausted that they can barely function, and in their panic state, a magical mishap scorches some of their crucial paperwork, sending dark smoke filling the room. Luckily, Florim arrives just in time with much-needed reinforcements from the Demon Kingdom. She brings a large group of female students in neat school uniforms, telling them that helping out with the village's logistics will greatly boost their social standing back home. The students are initially shocked by the massive workload sitting on the desks, and one girl even panics when she recognizes a friend she thought was killed by a Lamia long ago. Florim motivates the stressed girls by promising them a massive feast and an all-you-can-pat session with Zabuton and the direwolves once they finish their shifts. The students quickly organize and get to work sorting the records by document type. Meanwhile, Grandmaria flies ahead of the main group to scout a safe route for the new settlement and reports back to Hiraku that the area is completely free of dangerous monsters. Hiraku and Tia stand by the river to discuss the best possible location for the new village. Tia suggests building it far downstream to establish a clear hierarchy with the Great Tree Village. She also strongly insists on placing it across the river to make it easier to defend in case the massive influx of new immigrants ever try to stage a rebellion. Hiraku thinks she is being a bit too paranoid about an uprising, but he agrees that the defensive logic is sound. They eventually find a suitable spot near a massive, distinctive tree on the other side of the river. The very first step is to clear a path through the dense, overgrown forest. A group of high elves and Daga the lizard man try to chop down the massive trees to clear the land, but the wood is incredibly tough and easily deflects their green magical attacks. Seeing them struggle to make a dent in the bark, Hiraku steps up and summons his omnipotent tool. He transforms it into a massive axe and effortlessly slices through the thickest trunks with a single glowing yellow swing. He quickly clears the entire area on his own, creating a massive pile of usable timber for the upcoming construction. With the land cleared, the group immediately starts building the necessary infrastructure for the new village. They construct a sturdy wooden bridge over the river, though Hiraku intentionally keeps it relatively narrow to prevent large monsters from easily crossing over and attacking them. They also dig a long canal to bring fresh water down from upstream, set up a large reservoir, and establish a material processing site to handle all the newly chopped timber. Daga and the muscular lizardmen work tirelessly to process the heavy wood, but Hiraku eventually forces them to take a much-needed break. During his downtime, Hiraku uses his carving tools to create a highly detailed wooden statue of Zabuton. He wishes he had made it a bit bigger, but he is still proud of the result. Lu soon drops by the clearing with baby Alfred wrapped in a blanket and gently scolds Hiraku for working too hard on the new village. She tells him to get some actual rest, so Hiraku takes a moment to sit on a nearby log and share a quiet drink with her while the wolves nap in the sun. Once the break is over, the construction of the actual houses begins in earnest. To speed up the complicated process, they prepare all the foundation pillars and planks according to the blueprints in advance. The elves and lizardmen then work closely together to assemble the pre-cut materials on the dirt plots. The high elves use their powerful magic to easily lift massive wooden walls and heavy roof beams directly into place, making the construction go incredibly fast. Hiraku watches them work and remembers how much he struggled to build his very first small hut by himself without any nails or help. Amazed by how efficiently the team works together now, Anne and the other maids constantly bring out bowls of hot salmon and vegetable soup to keep the builders fed and energized throughout the day. The construction site gets a little chaotic when one of the elves recklessly throws a heavy wooden board to her friend standing on a roof, prompting Hiraku to immediately put up a safety sign strictly banning the throwing of lumber. Despite the minor hiccups, the new settlement quickly takes shape, with rows of identical wooden cabins lined up neatly in the forest clearing. Just as Hiraku is wondering exactly how many people they are taking in, Drime suddenly teleports into the village in a total panic. He apologizes for arriving without any warning, explaining that the refugee situation was far more urgent than he originally expected. He reveals that he has brought a group of 72 Minotaur refugees who were violently driven out of their home village and left stranded on the road to starve. Hiraku is shocked to see the Minotaurs, as he expected them to have traditional cow heads, but they actually look like massive, muscular humans with thick horns, standing well over 2 meters tall. Gordon, the Minotaur representative, introduces himself and explains that his people are barely scraping by and have many young children to support. Hiraku immediately orders the maids to serve them huge bowls of warm porridge to ease their hunger. While the Minotaurs eat, Hiraku worries about their specific dietary needs, but Nerf the lizardman steps in. He mentions that he used to live near Minotaurs in the mountains and offers to gather their opinions on the food. However, a major logistical problem arises when Hiraku shows the Minotaurs to the newly built wooden cabins. The houses were designed for normal-sized people, so the giant Minotaurs cannot even fit through the front doors or stand up inside the cramped rooms. The guest house in the main village is also completely full, leaving Hiraku scrambling to find a quick solution for the massive refugees. Before Hiraku can figure out what to do with the Minotaurs, Florem receives an urgent magical message from her father, Beazle. Beazle suddenly teleports into the village looking completely exhausted, having used his rapid teleportation magic repeatedly to evacuate another large group of refugees from the war zone. He drops them off and immediately leaves to rest his strained body. Hiraku turns around and is stunned to find a massive herd of 100 centaurs waiting for him in the clearing. Their leader, a female centaur named Grewald, introduces herself as a relative of the Viscount Beeg family from the Demon Kingdom. She acts incredibly arrogant and demands to be treated with strict aristocratic etiquette by the villagers. Hiraku nervously admits that he doesn't know anything about noble customs, which only makes Grewald more irritated and demanding. However, Lashashi Droy, one of the blonde civil servant girls, steps forward and introduces herself as the second daughter of Count Droy. Since a count vastly outranks a viscount in the noble hierarchy, Grewald instantly panics, drops to the ground in a desperate prostrate position, and frantically begs for mercy. Lashashi politely but firmly puts Grewald in her place, reminding her that they are guests in this village and absolutely cannot make demands of the chief. Lashashi then offers to take full charge of managing the centaurs so Hiraku doesn't have to deal with their noble drama. Hiraku gladly accepts her help, but the housing crisis only gets worse. When he shows the centaurs to the new cabins, they run into the exact same problem as the Minotaurs. The houses are far too cramped for their large horse halves, and they cannot magically shrink their bodies to fit inside the tiny rooms. While Hiraku is trying to figure out where to put the centaurs, a group of young women with green hair suddenly arrives at the village borders. They are led by a woman named Igu and carry a small talking tree stump mascot with a simple face. Igu introduces her people as the Nunu Daphne, a rare race of tree spirits. They explain that they lost their homeland to severe flooding because humans cut down too many trees in their forest, and they traveled safely through the dangerous monster territories by transforming their bodies into trees to hide. They heard about Hiraku's prosperous village from Michael the merchant and came seeking a permanent home. Hiraku happily welcomes them and offers to throw a large banquet, assuming they want fruit or meat. However, Igu politely declines the offer, explaining that her people do not eat normal food at all. Instead, they strictly desire high-quality soil, clean water, and bright sunlight to survive. Hiraku takes them to a freshly tilled farming plot, and the new Daphne immediately step onto the dark dirt barefoot, expressing their pure joy at the rich, fragrant soil. A small white flower even magically blooms on their tree stump mascot's branch to show its happiness. Hiraku then offers to show them to the new houses, mentioning that they built them with large windows for extra sunlight. Igu completely rejects the idea of living indoors, insisting that they strongly prefer to stay outside in the dirt where they can absorb the rain and sun directly into their bodies. Hiraku tries to argue that getting soaked in the cold rain is a bad thing, but the tree spirits are perfectly content just standing motionless in the open field. With 3 massive groups of refugees suddenly dumped on him, Hiraku is forced to completely reorganize the village's living arrangements overnight. Since the Minotaurs have a lot of young children, Hiraku gives them priority and allows them to squeeze into the main village buildings and the crowded guest house for the time being. The centaurs are directed to rent out the spacious cow sheds, which comfortably accommodate their large lower halves. Meanwhile, the new Daphne simply spend the entire night standing completely still in the middle of the farming fields under the twin moons. The brand new settlement that Hiraku and the elves just spent days building sits completely empty because none of the new immigrants can actually fit inside the standard cabins. The elf girls collapse face down on the lodge floor in comical exhaustion, realizing that all their hard physical labor was essentially for nothing. However, they know they cannot just leave the refugees sleeping in sheds and dirt fields forever. Hiraku rallies the exhausted group, telling them they just need to rethink their architectural designs from scratch. They immediately start drawing up plans to construct massive, custom-built houses big enough to comfortably fit the 72 giant minotaurs and the 100 centaurs, determined to make sure everyone finally gets a proper place to live. Hiraku meets with the representatives of the new races and apologizes for not having suitable homes ready for them to settle into right away. He tells them that they all live together now and should put aside formalities to just relax. One of the high elves still acts extremely subservient, claiming she is nothing more than house dust in his presence, so Hiraku tries to get everyone to act normally. Latiachi brings out a cue card and instructs Hiraku to act more self-important when dealing with Gruwald, the centaur representative. Hiraku awkwardly complies, telling Gruwald that he chooses to allow her presence and has high hopes for the work she will perform. Gruwald immediately lifts her head with a determined expression and promises an excellent performance, and Latiachi praises Hiraku for his acting skills. Hiraku then introduces the specific representatives who will look after the new groups. Narf the lizard man is assigned to attend to the minotaurs, Latiachi will oversee the centaurs, and Mam the beast woman is put in charge of the new Daphne. Mam is very nervous about her new responsibilities but promises to do her absolute best, especially since Senna recommended her for the higher level position. Hiraku then addresses the housing situation, explaining that the main village was only meant for human-sized beings. Instead of forcing the large newcomers into tiny homes, he decides to build entirely separate villages fit for the minotaurs and centaurs. They use the locations that the high elves previously scouted and plan out a route to build roads and irrigation channels connecting the settlements. Since there is a lot of dense forest to clear, Hiraku asks the dragons and angels for help. Lasti and the others enthusiastically unleash massive magical attacks, completely obliterating the trees and creating a massive path of destruction. Hiraku is shocked by the sheer power of their magic and quickly tells them to stop, fearing they might accidentally burn down the entire forest and turn it into a wasteland. He forces them to hold back their power and just clear a path alongside the river. The group gets to work digging trenches, moving heavy logs, and constructing wooden walls for the new settlements. A month passes, and everyone's hard work finally brings the 2 new villages into shape. In the second village, they construct houses specifically for the minotaurs. Since the minotaurs are quite tall, they build taller one-story homes with massive furniture to match their size. Hiraku inspects the newly built rooms and realizes that what he thought was a table is actually just a chair for the minotaurs. The beds are also uniquely designed with special slots, so the minotaurs can sleep comfortably without their large horns getting in the way or hitting the headboards. In the third village, they build homes for the centaurs. Since their lower bodies are built like horses, standard homes do not work well for them. Instead, they construct large, stable-like houses with exposed rafters and very wide entrances. The centaurs explain that their kind have trouble operating ordinary doors, so Hiraku plans to add large curtains drawn by ropes instead, along with sliding doors for rainy days. Meanwhile, back in the main village, Zabuton works hard weaving new clothes for baby Alfred, though the shirts she makes turn out to be a bit too large for the infant. With the new villages finished just before winter, the group gathers in the main hall to discuss what to name them. Hiraku initially suggests naming them Upton, Middleton, and Downton based on their locations, but the girls feel those names do not sound right. He then suggests simply calling them Village 1, Village 2, and Village 3. The civil servant girls immediately agree to this idea, desperate to avoid having to rewrite every single administrative document they have already made with those temporary designations. Hiraku decides to leave Village 1 uninhabited for now, appoints Gordon as the mayor of Village 2, and makes Gruwald the mayor of Village 3. Latiachi suggests that since the new settlements have their own mayors, Hiraku needs a new title to establish a clear hierarchy, suggesting names like High Mayor, Great Mayor, or King Mayor. Hiraku refuses to go that far and decides to just keep things simple. The New Daphne representative then asks when a village will be built for her people. Hiraku apologizes and explains that they decided against building a dedicated village for the tree spirits since they prefer to stay rooted in one place. Instead, he asks them to scatter around the important locations in the existing settlements to stand watch and relay information. Since the New Daphne can communicate with each other through telepathy, they make perfect messengers. They also agree to watch over the uninhabited Village 1 so it does not waste away, and they even act as natural streetlights in the evenings by emitting a soft magical glow. With the housing situation sorted, Hiraku tries to assign jobs to the residents of the new villages, but a major problem quickly arises. Gordon reports that the Minotaurs are actually a tranquil people, and are not suited for hunting in the dangerous forest. Gruwald adds that most of the centaurs are refugees and are hardly able to fend for themselves either. Hiraku realizes he vastly underestimated how difficult hunting is because Kuro's Inferno wolves always handled it so effortlessly. He decides to keep the new villagers out of the woods entirely, and places more defenders in both villages. He talks with Kuro and Zabuton, assigning their offspring to protect the new settlements. The New Daphne are strong but rely on ambush tactics, so they cannot hunt large numbers either. To make the villages self-sufficient without hunting, Hiraku sets everyone to work tilling new farming fields. However, the Minotaurs and Centaurs soon report that none of the seeds they plant are taking root. Hiraku is confused and asks when they usually plant the seeds, but the villagers admit they have no idea. Hiraku suddenly realizes that the only reason they were able to raise crops so easily in the middle of the forest, regardless of the season or weather, was because of his almighty farming tool. Its divine powers made the soil instantly fertile and accelerated the growth of whatever he imagined. Since he is the only one who can use the tool, the new villages have to farm the normal way, which proves to be incredibly difficult. They decide to lay down straw to keep the soil warm and plant winter wheat, knowing it will sit through the winter and be ready for harvest before summer. Gordon reveals he has some prior farming experience, so everyone starts calling him their farming senpai, as he guides them through scattering the seeds. Hiraku is grateful for the agricultural lessons and carves 2 wooden statues to honor the gods of creation and agriculture. The villagers are impressed by the sculptures, noting that the god of agriculture looks like an old man holding a stick. While the Minotaurs handle the farming, the Centaurs use their incredible speed to develop a new line of work. They start a delivery service transporting wooden crates and goods between the villages. They are perfectly suited for this job because they can easily outrun any monsters on the road. The adult centaurs take turns making regular deliveries, though they sometimes run so fast that their carts crash and send cargo flying everywhere, prompting Hiraku to hope they start putting safety first. Later, Gruwald approaches Hiraku and asks about the regular horse living on his farm. Hiraku admits that he has always wanted to ride it, but the horse completely ignores him and refuses to let him mount. Since Gruwald is a centaur, he asks if she can communicate with the horse and convince it to give him a ride. Gruwald says she cannot actually speak horse, but she uses a subtle spell to calm the animal down. Hiraku happily mounts the horse, and Gruwald gets on as well, telling him to hold onto her shoulders tightly. She then commands the horse to pick up the pace, and they take off through the forest at blinding speed. Hiraku loves his first ride and thanks Gruwald for the experience. Some days later, Hiraku approaches the horse alone, and successfully gets it to let him ride without any help. He happily pets the horse and rides it across the field. Gruwald secretly watches them from behind a cabin and becomes incredibly shocked and jealous that the horse is letting Hiraku ride it so easily. The next morning, Hiraku finds Gruwald waiting for him on the path. She insists that the horse is a dangerous wild beast and demands that Hiraku ride on her back instead. Hiraku points out that the horse is right there and is perfectly tame, but Grunwald refuses to back down. To settle the dispute, Hiraku promises to ride the horse and the centaur on alternating days so they do not fight over him. Elsewhere, a maid checks on the Nunu Daphne tree stump, asking if it needs anything. The stump simply says that the sky is blue before transforming into a cute wooden creature, leaving the maid happily confused. As things finally settle down, Hiraku relaxes under a tree with Lou and baby Alfred. He admits that he has been worrying a lot about the future, fearing what might happen to the village if he ever gets sick or loses the power of his farming tool. Lou tells him to stop stressing so much, reminding him that he will not be retiring anytime soon and they can deal with those problems when they actually happen. Hiraku agrees but brings up another major concern. The main village is completely overflowing with women and has hardly any men, which makes him worry about the future generations. He hoped the new immigrants would solve the gender imbalance, so he meets with Gordon to ask about the Minotaurs. Gordon explains that they have 28 men, but it is a strict custom for Minotaurs to only marry other Minotaurs due to their massive size. Hiraku realizes he cannot rely on them to intermarry with the other villagers. He then asks Grunwald about the centaurs. She reveals that while they have 30 males, they are all just young boys, as the adult men are currently away fighting in a war. She notes that it is difficult for centaurs to pair with other races, but she assumes Hiraku is demanding one of their women as a price for letting them live in the village. Before Hiraku can explain, Grunwald passionately declares that she is completely single and offers herself to him. She claims that she is prepared to serve because she believes men enjoy overpowering strong women. Hiraku frantically tries to calm her down, insisting that he is not demanding anything like that and just wants to make sure everyone is happy. Grunwald gets flustered and continues to push the issue, but Hiraku ignores her advances and just hopes the centaurs continue to do well among themselves without any forced arrangements. But that's where this video ends. Like and subscribe to make sure you're here for the next part. See you soon.